Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be talking about Stuart Turton's The Last Murder at the End of the World. Kind of interesting to be here after his first book, his debut novel, 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, actually won the best read of the loin stream for 2024. And everything that I've read after that, his two other books, have just been like, well, this is a choice. Now, the one thing I can say about Stuart is that his books, his signature, his writer's signature is that his books are very different. But at this point, it also looks like his writer's signature is writing gimmicks. And in some cases, it feels like it's just trying to outsmart the reader. But we're going to get into everything that this book is, the discussion items in this book, like the themes, and I'll look forward to your guys' thoughts. However, before we get into that, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, there are 3 ways. Number one is through Leigh, the monthly prompt writing contest. Number two is through the Fresh Meat feature, where if you're an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out, if you submit the first chapter, it'll be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. And the third is during the summer, I will be reading books that you guys submit asking me to read. They're going to be randomly selected from the list of things you guys have submitted. All of those links are in the description down below. And the third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books. With that said, let's jump into this. And I'm going to give you a very brief synopsis of like what this book is about before we get into the micro walkthrough and commentary. So The Last Murder at the End of the World is about this island colony that is surrounded by a protective bubble. The decisions of humans have pretty much destroyed all of humanity, and so all that is left is what is on this island, and it is led by 3 scientists who are named Nema, Thea, and then Nema's son, Hephaestus. And then you've got all of the villagers. When the main scientist of this group is murdered, there is actually a kill switch in place that disarms the protective bubble that's around the island. So then the smog starts to seep in, and they have to figure out who the murderer is in order to turn off the kill switch before the fog reaches the island. So that's pretty much the too long didn't read version of the plot of this book. Now we're going to get into the story, and I'm looking forward to your guys' discussions on this. I may not be a fan of this. I actually absolutely hate the theme of this story. And we are so far away from where Evelyn Hardcastle's theme was, where that ending was, to where this ending is. It's gotten so cynical, and it's just an 8-year difference. So I say just an 8-year difference, but a lot can change about somebody in 8 years, especially because Hardcastle was 2018 and this was 2024, and just the way that things have changed. If you read Hardcastle or have read Hardcastle and then you look at this, let me know what your thoughts are on that shift. But So with all that out of the way, let's jump into this. Enter the first 2 characters, Nema Mandropilius and the narrator, someone named Abby. So what you should know about Abby is that Abby is an AI device that is implanted in everybody's brain. It was designed by Nema, and it can control the villagers' bodies if it wants to. It cannot control the scientists' bodies. So that's one thing to know. It also is an omnipotent narrator. It is first-person narrator, so you've got a majority of third person with this first-person narrator mixed in, and Abby is in everybody's head, can read everybody's thoughts. That's going to be important because we're dealing with a mystery. Abby destroys this whole thing. But so there's that. So Nema and Abby are in a room, sitting over a paper, pen trembling in Nema's hand. Abby insists that there's no other way for this plan to work without someone dying. Nema argues, quote, "And nothing will change. I spent 90 years trying to rid humanity of its selfishness, greed, and impulse towards violence. Finally, I have a way to do it." She touches the tarnished cross around her neck for comfort. "If this plan works, we'll create a world without suffering. For the first time in our history, there'll be a perfect equality. I can't turn my back on that because I don't have the strength to do what's necessary." Now, in retrospect, knowing what I know about Nema and what she is doing and what she has to do, this speech at the beginning is diabolical. Like what she is talking about doing, and actually blasphemous. But I would say the entire theme of this book is blasphemous. So we're going to get into that. You'll You'll know what I mean and why. You can make guesses based on that sentence alone. It's here that we learn Abby can read Nema's thoughts, because Abby can read everybody's thoughts, but it's going to kind of just be a slow reveal that Abby can read everybody's thoughts. Nema insists that they can avoid pitfalls if they're cautious, while Abby says that if you set this in motion, there is no going back. Everyone will die in approximately 187 hours if it doesn't work out. And all of her secrets are going to come to life. They have to come to light in order for her plan to work. I mean, she knows that. She is planning to tell everybody the truth. And by everybody, I mean tell the villagers the truth about themselves. Abby is like, is that what you want? And Nema says, quote, the greatest achievements have always brought the greatest risks. Start your countdown, Abby. In 4 days, we're either going to change the world or die trying. And so the story begins. 107 hours until extinction. With that said, I'm going to read you the first page of the actual story after the prologue to get a vibe for how it's written. Quote, 2 rowboats float at world's end, a rope pulled taut between them. There are 3 children in each with exercise books and pencils listening to Nema deliver her lesson. She's at the bow of the boat on the right, gesticulating toward a wall of black fog that rises a mile into the air from the ocean's surface. The setting sun is diffused through the sooty darkness, creating the illusion of flames burning on the water. Thousands of insects are swirling inside, glowing gently. They're held back by a barrier produced by 23 e-meters located around the island's perimeter. Nema's lessons wave past Seth, who's the only person on either of the boats not paying attention. Unlike the children who range in age from 8 to 12, Seth's 49 with a creased face and sunken eyes. It's his job to row Nema and her students out here and back again when they're done. He's peering over the edge, his fingers in the water. The ocean's warm and clear, but it won't stay that way for long. It's October, a month of uncertain temper. Glorious sunshine gives way to sudden storms, which burn themselves out quickly and then apologize as they hurry away, leaving bright blue skies in their wake. The emitters were designed to run for hundreds of years unless Nema falters, losing her thread. They row the boat through water where the fish are, well, disintegrated, really, and Nema warns them that, as you can see, the fog eats away at anything that goes through it. The only place where the fog isn't is in this small bubble around the island, and then there's also a smaller island with a lighthouse on it that is also within the perimeter of the emitters. Enter Magdalene, who is sitting on the pier watching swimmers and the rowboats out there. She's nervous about her son who's on that rowboat, and so she is painting in order to, well, I think she's using charcoal, but she's doing art in order to distract herself. As she waits, she is unable to focus, so she goes inside the barracks looking for her friend Emery, who is the actual main character, who is posing for the sculptor named Mattis. Now, it's kind of interesting / weird that it chose to use Magdalene as the entry point here for the villagers, since Magdalene ultimately is not important. Just feels like a misdirect if it's not just sloppy at this point. When Magdalene finally gets the chance to talk to Emery tries to quell her fears that anything bad might happen to her son, because Magdalene is a little bit of a worrywart, going a little bit above and beyond with the worries that she doesn't need to have. Magdalene is eventually reunited with her son, and Emery goes off with Nema, who asks Emery about all of the jobs that she's done, how her luck is going with trying things out, and as always, Emery is like, I fail at everything I do. I'm not really good for anything. Nema is like, well, how about I train you to be a teacher because I'm about to retire. Now, that's kind of a lot all in one day, considering Nema's about to retire, like, immediately, like within the next 24 to 48 hours level of immediately. Because by retire, she knows she's not coming back to this. So you would think that maybe she would prepare Emery to take over this role well before 48 hours or less before her permanent retiration. Emery says that she is working on a play, but doesn't want to rush it. Apparently she's been working on this play for a while, so it just sounds another thing like, well, I'm trying to do stuff, but I can't really do anything. She says that she's just as bad at it as she is at every other thing that she's picked up. As they go from the barracks to Nema's dorm, Emery notes, quote, over the years, the villagers have done their best to repair the dorms, but there's only so much that can be done with a building this old. The concrete walls are riddled with cracks and holes. The gray floor tiles are shattered, and the beams supporting the roof are rotted. Mildew permeates the air. Such decay is dreary, so the villagers beat it back with color and life. Nema has put down a large rug and placed a vase of freshly cut flowers on the windowsill. The walls are covered in paintings spanning every artist who has ever worked in the village. Most of them aren't very good, leading Emery to wonder why Nema chose to preserve them. In many cases, the bare concrete would be an improvement. Why is Emery so mean about these pictures? And also, how does she know like a comparison of what is good and what is not good if the villager's skill is always pretty low? Like, what is she comparing goodness to, that concrete walls are better than these other people's drawings? Because if we're talking about like caveman level paintings or like stick figures, what is she comparing it to that those look bad? Because she has never seen life outside of this island. The one thing that Emery does seem to be good at is observation and asking questions that no one wants to ask. Insatiable curiosity, Abby calls it. It makes me think that Emery is going to be the detective in this story as the mystery comes out, and yeah, spoiler alert, she is. Nema also has a private library of books from before the world ended and gives one to Emery, a murder mystery, because she's got a collection of murder mysteries like Sherlock Holmes that she just gives Emery, which flashes in Emery's mind the last murder at the end of the world. Quote, "The last one took place over 90 years ago, just before the world ended. Two friends argued on a stairwell in Nairobi about a promotion. In a jealous rage, one shoved the other, who fell down the steps and broke her neck. The killer had just enough time to wonder if he could get away with it before the fog came pouring out the ground. He died a second later, along with everybody he'd ever known and most of the people that he hadn't. There hasn't been another murder since. I made sure of it." She's made sure of it? Nema, I'm thinking you did something to murder everybody in the world, because girl, how did you make sure of it? Hephaestus, Nema's son, comes in looking for her, so Nema must see herself out. Emery's concerned for the way that Nema looks, and Nema just says that she's worried, running an experiment, that if it goes wrong, she'll have to do something unforgivable. And this is just Nema straight up lying, because Nema knows exactly what she is about to do. Now, she might not know what the outcome of this thing is, but she knows that she is cashing out, and she's not going to see the end of this experiment. There's a murder. Okay, like you guys know, I've already said there's a murder in this. Nema's the one that dies. The rest of these comments will make sense in time as we get there. However, you probably are already forming, hopefully, some theories, because then you can connect the dots as we go through. Switch over to this guy named Adil's perspective. This person was banished from the village when he learned the truth and tried to murder Nema. Apparently, he wasn't just thrown into the mist or the hurricane. He's just creeping through binoculars on Nema and Emery and chortling about how naive Emery is for thinking that Nema is her friend. He says, "You don't know what she's taken from you. He. It feels just like, again, a misdirect, something to add tension, but it's not really meaningful. The characters in this generally feel like tools, not real people that are trying to live in this world that was semi-created." So Abby is over here floating in Adil's thoughts, because remember, Abby, the omnipotent AI thing, is in everybody's thoughts, and hearing him threaten Nema, Hephaestus, and Thea with a knife in his hand and some crazy chatter as he's like stroking the knife, while Abby is like, "Hey, you really don't want to do that." And Adil's like, "You can't watch me all the time," but Abby has been there since forever. One of the things that the story said earlier on is that none of these villagers have ever known what privacy is, because from the day that they gained consciousness, they've always had Abby in their head. So how is it that even Adil could be like, "Well, you're not here all of the time," when clearly even the narrative, which is Abby, says that they have never known loneliness. They have never known privacy, because Abby has always been there. So it doesn't really make sense for this guy to be like, "Well, you can't always watch me." Yes, he literally can. And that comes to another thing of how these characters aren't really living authentically in this situation, because if you were grown up in this situation, you've never known anything different, you've never known anything better, what exactly are you comparing this to that you could be like, "Hey, I've had times alone"? Maybe you have times when Abby isn't talking to you, but you would be aware that Abby is there. Now we switch over to Mattis's funeral celebration. So if you recall, a couple of chapters ago, we had Emery, who was posing for Mattis because he is a sculptor. Well, Mattis is actually her grandfather, and he is 60. And on this island, you get taken away and die in the night when you're 60. Why? Because. That's just because. They don't have, like, that's just what Nema and them have always set up. There's no, like, real reason for it within the culture. It just is what happens. They ascend at 60. So they get a celebration on the night of their 60th birthday. They celebrate life, and then they all go to bed. And then the 60-year-old does not wake up in the morning. So, quote, "This is the way that they revere the dead. They remember what they offered the world and what everybody else has to do to fill the gap. There are no prayers here, no thoughts of an afterlife. The reward for a good life is the living of it. Mattis is at the center of a long table, surrounded by his oldest friends. They are laughing and reminiscing, knowing their own days are nearly at an end too. Everybody dies on their 60th birthday, whether they're healthy or not. They enjoy their funeral, then go to sleep as normal. At some point in the night, their hearts simply stop beating. After a lifetime of service, dying painlessly in their bed is the least that I can give them." Now remember, every time it says I, it's talking about the AI Abby. It is also very rare that someone makes it to 60 to die, because they usually die in accidents or from other things earlier. And when you do get there, you get this super long goodbye. Quote, "Knowing when he's going to die has afforded him the luxury of long goodbyes. For the last week, he's seen everybody he wants to see, everybody he cares about, knows how he feels about them, and he, in turn, is full of love. There is nothing left unsaid. Emery can only hope to die as fulfilled, but grief presses against her chest, tearing at her heart. Her mother died from a fever when Emery was 12, and her father seemed to drift away from her. And her father seemed to drift away with her. Her grandmother was long dead, so it was Mattis who read Emery stories at night and gave her jobs to do during the day, mindless, thankless things to keep her from dwelling on the pain of her lost family." She runs into this man named Seth, who is actually her dad and Mattis's son, and is surprised to find him working during the ceremony instead of spending time with his dad, since his dad is going to be leaving them later that evening. Quote, "She came here expecting to find him hobbled by the same grief as herself, but she now realizes that was idiotic. Every villager's life is an act of service. They care for each other before themselves, and his father is devout to that ideal. He won't cry until he's filled every pothole, patched every roof, harvested every vegetable, and loaded the furnace that will cremate his father. By his estimation, sadness is just selfishness that people pity rather than scorn." You know, that line right there, by his estimation, sadness is just selfishness that people pity rather than scorn, is an insane way of this for thinking. Because you are also going to learn that this whole thing is an experiment on empathy, that she was wanting to create, that Nema wanted to create a people with more empathy than humans. Because humans, as she said in the opener, have an instinct towards violence. And so she's going to constantly talk about empathy, but how can you be like, my people are so much more empathetic than humans, when they don't see sadness as legitimate? I mean, obviously, Nema's experiment wasn't as perfect as she's going to claim it is, so there is that. There's the fact that Nema's an unreliable narrator character herself, but still, to be taken into consideration. She's told that she needs to find a way to serve the village soon, and then Seth asks how Clara, her daughter, is doing. Emery hasn't heard from her since she went off to her apprenticeship some weeks ago. She's an apprentice underneath Thea as a scientist, because Thea regularly takes apprentices. Though the work for Thea is apparently very dangerous, as many of the apprentices just end up dead. Those that don't die during apprenticeship, though, normally only last about a decade, even once they get the job, so Emery wasn't happy about her daughter going off to do that, while Clara and everyone else saw it as an absolute honor. What it should also be noted is that Emery was an assistant, and Emery's husband was also an assistant/apprentice. And Emery quit after like 2 weeks, and Jack, her husband, disappeared while being an apprentice to Nema. And it's assumed that he died at sea. Emery's reluctant to give all of this trust to the elders, Thea, Festus, and Nema, that's what they refer to them as. And this is offensive to Seth, saying that they are the only links to the old world. Of course they are worth more than the villagers. Of course they should be revered more than the villagers. They know more. Quote, "Emery's heard this story so often she could recite it with her father's exact inflections. 90 years ago, huge sinkholes appeared on every continent, swallowing entire cities. A strange black fog poured out of them, filled with glowing insects that ripped apart whatever they touched. No matter what the nations of the world tried, the fog kept spreading. It took a year for it to cover the earth, societies crumbling to infighting and barbarianism long before they were destroyed. The only beacon of hope was a broadcast from Nema. calling all survivors to a small Greek island. So she was the chief scientist of a huge lab called the Blackheath Institute, which had managed to build a barrier capable of holding the fog back. She promised safety to everybody who could make the journey. In the end, only a few hundred bedraggled survivors managed it, but reaching the island proved to be only the start of their ordeal. The refugees had grown up in a world where food was found on shelves, medicine was bought in shops, and an individual's survival was due to finances rather than skill. Any information they needed was borrowed from a screen, leaving them no knowledge to fall back on when those screens vanished. They didn't know how to farm or forage or how to repair the derelict buildings they were depending on for shelter. Hard years came and went, dwindling the numbers of refugees. Almost every month, somebody was crushed by falling masonry or burned by accidental fires. They scratched themselves on rusty nails and died screaming in puddles of sweat. They mistook poisonous mushrooms for edible ones and went swimming in the months when the seas teemed with jellyfish and sharks. Survival was difficult and death was easy, and many abandoned the fight on their own accord. Thankfully for the human race, they left behind children, and it's these genes that the villagers are all descended from. The 3 elders are all that's left of the 117 scientists who stayed in Blackheath when the fog first appeared, and their blood still teemed with the vaccinations, improvements, and technologies that were common before the world ended. They age slowly, never get sick, and everybody treats them with this instinctive reverence that only Nema's earned, according to Emery. So, did we only just bring like a bunch of good for nothings to the island? Nobody knows anything about survival? Really? And I'm sharing all of that as well for the world building / exposition on how this world operates, or at least the setup of getting to the island. Though this is a weird way to put it, according to Emery. So, and also to note the weird way that this is putting it, according to Emery. That would indicate that the narrator knows Emery is wrong. Because remember, the narrator is first person Abby, who is describing all of this, who is reaching into everybody's thoughts. So if we're going to end this with, according to Emery, that means that is a biased thought, biased perspective that may not be correct. Emery and Seth fight over trusting the elders or not, with Emery's lack of blind faith putting a dagger between herself and her father, which is kind of weird since she was following Nema around and was going to be Nema's apprentice in becoming a teacher. Like, she didn't have any negative thoughts towards Nema, but now she's like, we should question them a little bit more. Before she goes back to the funeral, she asks her father if he's got anything to say that he would like said to Mattis, and he's like, nah, I've already spoken to him this morning. I don't have anything else to say to Mattis. It's a pretty cold, pretty mechanical world if we're talking about empathy here. The evening bell rings and says that it's time for everyone to go to bed, so people collect themselves to head to their beds. Parents try to collect their children, and we learn, quote, every child has a parent, but that's an emotional title, not a practical one. They're raised by the village. It's the only way of making the job manageable. So none of these villagers can actually have children, and we're going to learn eventually that the children in this place all show up when they're about 8 years old. The scientists bring them in, and then they're assigned to somebody based on whether the scientists believe that you can raise the child. So then you become their main parental figure, but you're not their biological parent, and it's just because they think that you are mature enough to handle the child. As Emery reaches the sleeping area, she finds Grandpa Mattis, the man of the hour, sitting with a large green gem around his neck. Quote, unless they die suddenly, every villager bequeaths their memories to me before death. In those final few breaths, I catalog every experience they've ever had, even the ones that they don't remember, and store them indefinitely in one of these gems, allowing others to relive them whenever they wish. Unfortunately, the villagers only wear the memory gems during their funeral, giving them somewhat a grim aspect. It's a very, very cultish kind of thing. And also, we don't know where these gems come from. It's just kind of, it's kind of magic. I don't really want to call this story sci-fi because a lot of it is just like, believe me, bro. And there is no science behind this thing. It's just like, it happens. Like, it's going to try to argue that it's somewhat sci-fi, and you'll even see it in the comments and other people's reviews of this book that they'll say sci-fi. But where is the science in like having this plunger-like thing that you just stick on your head and it drills a hole into your head and sucks out your memories? That's not science. You can't do that. That's magic. That's magic in an electronic device. So remember that. Emery doesn't like how things are. She doesn't like that she is going to lose her grandpa for no good reason. He's not sick, he's not weak, and he's not anything that should be dying tonight. If he were an elder, he'd wake up tomorrow all of the same, because, now Emery is a little bit resentful that the elders are all older than the villagers, and they're forcing the people to just die at 60. Because why? Because the elders say so. Nema departs saying the phrase 5-5, to which Emery asks her grandfather what that means, and he says, I don't know. She's been saying that to me for years, and I never asked what it meant, because if she wanted to tell me, she'd let me know, but she just says it, so I don't ask. Mattis takes her to the sculpture that he was working on of her earlier and asks if she likes it. She says no, with an immediate explanation. Quote, he's curious but not insulted. Art isn't sacred in this village. It's a bawdy, boisterous communal activity. Poems are interrogated, even if they're recited, and bands will swap musicians in the midst of a single song if they're losing a beat. If an actor is struggling in a play, it's common for the crowd to call out lines or improvise better ones. Occasionally, they'll take over the part completely. Emery's scene, entire first acts rewritten by committee halfway through the performance. Can you imagine how annoying that would be? Her reason for disliking the statue doesn't look curious at all. She swears that she doesn't dislike the village, but that there are just things that she doesn't understand, like how much of which just has to do with the double standards between the elders and the villagers. Other things include falling asleep randomly at curfew time and finding that something different about her body, like scratches, bruises, splinters, bunions in her feet, that weren't there before. And no one would even acknowledge her questions. They all kind of just listen to her question and then turn away, and she's the only one asking these questions. Eventually, she was brave enough to ask Nema in class what happened when they were sleeping, and Nema said that they'd used them for tasks after curfew, but answered nothing after that. And everyone was both taken by Emery's bravery to even ask the question and then disappointed by the limits of the answer. So, in case that wasn't clear, they send them to bed at curfew, whatever time that is, and then use their bodies via the AI mind control in them to accomplish tasks during the night while they're asleep. And so that's likely also why many of them don't make it until 60, because they're sleep crafting. Sitting with her grandfather, he says, quote, this is my last night on Earth, so I'm going to say a few things that I've always wanted to say, starting with this. Tomorrow morning, you'll wake up one friend short, and you weren't exactly burdened with them to start with. Some of that isn't your fault, but some of it is. You're a clever girl, Em, but you've never had any patience for people who don't see the world the way you do. That wasn't a problem, except now. Clara's one of those people. It turns out her husband also died following Thea, and Emery believes that all who follow Thea end up dead. She doesn't want that to happen to her daughter. Mattis warns, quote, what's the use of loving somebody so much that they can't stand being in the same room as you? Clara's already lost her father. She can't lose her mother as well. Carry on like this, and you'll be 10 years older wondering why you two haven't spoken to each other anymore. Grandpa sees himself off to go and talk to his son one-on-one, and Emery is told to go to bed before curfew locks the doors. As she is on her way, she runs into Nema and Hephaestus, who are just arguing about Nema's experiments right there in the dorms in front of where the villagers are. Doesn't seem that smart if they're trying to keep this a secret from the villagers. Even she says this, and they keep going, quote, can't this wait until after curfew? Hisses Nema, peering at her son. She seems so small in his shadow, a doll made of twigs and twine with hay for hair. We're supposed to be protecting them, he says pleadingly, from themselves. That requires sacrifice. Sacrifice is when they make the choice. What we're doing is murder. Emery gasps, shocked to hear that awful word tossed around so casually without a book present. Not if it works, argues Nema. It never has before. At this point, it's no better than a death sentence. I know what I have been doing wrong, Hephaestus. I've adapted the procedure. It's going to succeed this time. Number one, none of this makes sense with what she's actually going to do. This is entirely a misdirect. This is entirely lying to the reader, unless it was a decision made by the author to do something different later than whatever this is. Because of all of the things that theoretically Nema already knows, it's not going to be murder. Also, if you're so worried about keeping this a secret, walk away. You've already done the curfew bells. Wait 5 seconds. But this doesn't even matter because Nema's whole thing is informing the freaking villagers of her secret. Quote, "You're the reason that I started these experiments, you know. I'll never forget the day that you washed up on this island. You were half dead, tortured, almost beyond recognition. I thought the fog had gotten you, but then you told me about the gangs and the camp where they held you." She reached up, touching the scar on his cheek. "I swore that I'd never let that happen to anybody again. Yes, we're risking the innocent life, but think of the reward if our experiment works. Every generation that comes after this will live in peace, without fear of war, crime, or violence. No human being will ever hurt another. We'll be able to let them roam the island freely without worrying what they'll do with that freedom. Put it on a scale, my darling. Think about how much good that we can do with one single act." Okay, now this is even crazier in retrospect. So Nema is the one that chose the people to come to the island, and we're going to learn at some point that she only brought people based on if they could buy tickets. She only brought billionaires and millionaires and sold tickets to this basically bunker island for them to come to. And she didn't bring her son at the end of the world. This woman wants to talk about human violence being a problem and how to eradicate human violence and how humans need empathy. And she left her son to die at the end of the world when the fog was taking over and sucking entire towns in. Is it because, like, did her son not have enough money to get a ticket to freaking Savior Island? I'm doing this for you. Is it because he washed up on the shore that she decided to switch from straight capitalism to becoming a safety tyrant? Like, give me your theories on this, because I'm confused at the moment. Maybe this rant doesn't make sense yet because we don't have all the details spared yet, but prepare yourself. You're going to get all of the details in due time, trust me. There are also, the other thing that bothered me about this argument and like many of the other interactions before this is so many of them feel like a you know Bob situation where it's like telling something to somebody who already knows the information because they've been living it, they've been involved in those discussions, whatever, but you're having that conversation with somebody who already knows in order to force the information out there to tell the reader. And this book specifically was so heavy-handed with providing information. It would mention something and then just exposit on you. Like when Clara was first brought up, it was like, Clara, here's a blurb about who the frick Clara is, because somebody asked, how's Clara? You don't need to exposit the second that you mention something. But this book just like, and it has no better way to express it. Also, it hasn't really established, beyond that blurb that I shared with you before about like the world ending and the fog coming out and it taking a year for it to like destroy everything. One, how did nobody else create Bunker Island? How did nobody else purchase these emitters from her? Nobody else created emitters, or maybe there are other islands elsewhere that have survived this. We don't really know. Obviously, she's going to have a very limited scope on like the whole rest of the world, and just broadcasting in general has been canceled. So I'm going to assume there are like pockets across the world of survivors that she just doesn't know about, because like, why would you? In this situation, why would you know? Hephaestus convinces Nema to wait another night to do her little experiment until they can run the proper health checks to make sure that there is nothing wrong with whomever they've picked for their secret business. That doesn't make any sense with this either. Are you telling me that Nema did not tell Hephaestus what her plan was? Okay, I feel like I need to just spoil this for you right now so you can start answering questions with me about this plot setup, because it feels like it comes out of nowhere in the end, okay? So I'm sorry for like spoiling all of this from this very beginning. I mean, I guess we're like, I don't know, 8 chapters in out of 70, but Nema killed herself. She set off this experiment and kills herself, because she believes that human beings are just flawed. They are irreversibly, infixably flawed, to the point of all humans need to be eradicated and the world needs to be given to these villagers that she has created to be nonviolent. And since her, Hephaestus, and Thea are the last of the living humans, because there are a bunch in stasis that came to the island that are waiting, you know, for the conditions to exist again to then be released. But Nema's lying about we need different conditions to bring them out, because Nema doesn't want to set humans free because she believes that human beings are fundamentally flawed and irreparable. So she just wants to replace humans with the villagers that she engineered. Okay, so what they're talking about with we need to do a health check before we run this top secret thing. I'm assuming that she's told Hephaestus something completely different, that she didn't tell him that she was going to kill herself. But also, how insane. Also, I think that it would have made more sense based on what we discover later about her plot. So a couple of other things. We're going to get there eventually in the plot, but I feel like I need to set this up now so you can follow along with it later. Is that she tried to create a situation where Thea and Hephaestus would agree to being under the same control as all the villagers. Because, like, they've all got Abby in their head, but the humans can't be controlled physically like the villagers can. Like, obviously, I already described how the villagers are used to build things while they're asleep, and that's because Abby can control their bodies. Not doable for the humans, and that includes Hephaestus and Thea. However, Nema tried to get them to agree to be controlled, but they said no. Also because the fungus that is used to control them, to control the villagers, is poisonous to humans at that level. I don't know what that really means because it's a human-like creature, but so they disagreed. So then Nema is still leaving these two humans behind who she believes are going to fundamentally make this perfect, meek world dangerous by virtue of being humans. That's why she doesn't want humans on this planet, is she wants it all to go to the villagers who are systematically not only brought up, but censored from being violent. However, she also knows that they aren't non-violent because one of them tried to murder her when he found out the truth. So why she thinks now is the time, not only is now not the time, but she knows in telling them the truth, they get angry. But she's got these like rose-colored glasses on her own creations that they are just better than humans. And maybe that's all just a way of saying how she can't be relied on to look at this clearly. Like, I'm trying to look at Nema as an unreliable narrator, but then I also don't know what she thinks she's doing. Like, why is now the time? Because it doesn't seem like it is. And if now was also the time, because now it just feels like if she's going to be like, look, I want to stop doing these stupid tests and raising these people in this way. I want them to take over and live normally. If we're going to do that, then why kill Mattis? Instead of having them come forward and be like, you know what, Mattis is not going to die this year, and nobody else is going to die at 60, because that's just going to make them all angry. So, like, why are we still doing that if you're going to tell them the truth immediately after this thing that, hey, by the way, you're all engineered by me, and all of these things that we are doing are actually just arbitrary rules that I have set. And also the whole dying at 60 thing is something that I did from a capitalist perspective because I wanted rich people to buy more of you because I created you as products to be sold as companions and to die at 60 so that I could sell them the newest model, which also doesn't make sense. We'll get there. But you would think that killing somebody's grandfather arbitrarily right before telling them, yeah, you don't have to, it's all made up because I made you guys, would be the first thing to step away. But it feels, again, like it's built to misdirect you. This entire story just feels like it's built to misdirect the reader in the same way that The Devil in the Dark Water was also just meant to trick the reader to get to the end so that Sammy could be like, I'm smarter than you. And that's what this feels like too. So now that you know the big plot twist at the end, keep that in mind as we go through the arcs of the story and the reveals and the other twists, because it not only does it just feel like the author is trying to outsmart the reader, but it's also just like the M. Night Shyamalan of books. Anyway, we're going to go forward now that I've told you all of that, because we just got off of this whole thing about health checks. Again, I'm going to assume that she's lying to Hephaestus, because if she told her son that she was going to kill himself to like give everything to the villagers, I think Hephaestus would have lost his mind. Because Hephaestus believes that he is better than the villagers. They are bugs that they have made, basically. While Hephaestus and Nema are yelling in the hallway right out here outside a curfew sleeping hour, they see Emery, who has been standing there listening to them yelling, and then she runs off. And Nema's like, quote, "How much did you hear?" Nema asks. "You're planning an experiment that could kill somebody," replies Emery, voice shaking. "It's the lesser of two evils, believe me. We're gambling a solitary life for the chance to make a better world in the long run. I'd give up my own life for that, wouldn't you?" It doesn't sound like they're being given a choice. They're not. I rather to assume nobility rather than to be disappointed by the lack of it. "This is wrong," Emery protests. "We don't hurt people. Not for any reason." "Of course you'd say that. but it's my job to make sure these wonderful morals of yours are never tested. Okay, does it count as a moral if you're never put in a position for it to be tested, if you're never given a choice for it, or is it just like the only way that you see things? Now, this has also been repeated like 3 times by now. It feels like I'm getting beat over the head with this theme at the moment of like, you're the moral people, you should never be tested, you should never be put in a difficult situation, I'm the keeper of you all. And for me, it sounded like this conversation was being had for the sake of the argument, not for the characters. Like it's more determined. Like the story is more concerned with making the thematic argument than having the characters who actually believe in something be arguing for it within the story. Would Emery admit to having heard everything? Would Nema argue over this? Would Emery lie about it to protect herself? And then Nema notices that Emery has the capacity to lie. And then would that create inferment to Nema that her creations are just like humans and not this like beautiful, wonderful, completely passive, non-violent, whatever that she thinks they are? Also, would Emery not challenge Nema on what she is doing, saying, you know, if you would give up your life for this, then why don't you? Why are you putting it on somebody else? Of course, we don't get any further with this because conveniently the curfew bell goes off and Emery passes out. She's got no control because the curfew bell directly interacts with Abby, who has that kind of control over them. So when it goes off, she passes out. Now we're at 74 hours until extinction. Everyone wakes up, ignoring the oddities on their body from the night, and fall into this routine that they don't know they're in, that Abby has put them on. It is now time for them all to gather, and Emery is thinking of Nema's experiment, that someone is going to die and they should be warned, but Abby is in her head overwriting her thoughts, saying that you can't change an outcome. Maybe you can get involved, sure, but you'll only change who is hurt. You won't change the outcome. What? Abby then brags about the placement in everybody's head, as it means that no one knows any better, and its thoughts can feel like their thoughts, so it can basically overwrite their thoughts. Emery writes down in a journal in her room to find out what Nema's experiments are and what 5-5 means. She tries to make out the message in this book that she got from Nema, but she can't. After showering, she goes to the lunch area where Mattis's body is in a cart, waiting to be taken to the incinerator. She's the only one who is having an emotional response to this, as everyone else ignores it, sees it as flesh, and the important part is already gone. She runs into her father and finds out that Seth fell asleep while looking for Grandpa on the beach, and Grandpa was talking to somebody when he fell asleep. His necklace gem fell off and washed away into the ocean, and no one knows who he was talking to, and now nobody will because his final moments are lost. Emery pushes how strange this is, and Seth is just done with Emery's constantly questioning everything. Emery's curiosity is insensitive, and he says, "Stay away from me," before walking away, with no desire to talk to his daughter ever again, which is unfortunately going to be difficult to do in such a small community. You might have to exile her, my guy. With Magdalene and her son, she's painting, and she notices that all the paintings on the walls are straightened, which isn't really normal. Usually they're all crooked, and the only time that they're usually straightened is when Adele has visited. But she still says that that's fairly important because he's been banished for attacking the elders. Apparently he was in charge of a ship that wrecked and killed Emery's husband, and his whole mindset changed after that, making him seen as crazy, and that's when he started going after the elders. She believes that he needs compassion and would have gotten it had he not attacked the elders, in which case instead he got banished. Kind of weird for her to notice. Only Adil does this. Oh well, I guess he's probably not here, which, you know, that could also be Abby just erasing it. This is something else that makes the entire narrative of the story just like not matter, because since Abby can control people's thoughts, can suppress people's thoughts, can control people's bodies, then anything that we hear or anything that anybody says, it's all a lie. It's all possibly a lie. So we're not actually going to find out anything, and they're never going to question anything that's suspicious because Abby is just going to overwrite anything and just disappear. So, like, obviously Abby didn't really appear in this portion to even go like, nah, Adil isn't here. It's just like Abby can secretly be behind the scenes of every single scene and every single entry of stuff just dropping off because Abby has that much control. We then move over to Clara, and she and her cohort Huey are on a mission with Thea and are exempt from curfew, so they're sitting under the stars. Clara can't believe that she's been able to become an assistant and also one of the youngest assistants ever alongside Huey. And she especially is honored by this since Thea didn't like Emery and worried that it might ruin her chances, though she never expected to be here. Huey is also a violinist and has been practicing for her recital and has been doing some amazing music that hasn't ever been heard before on the island. Clara seems to also have a crush on Huey and won't say anything while Abby is in Clara's head, saying to just tell her how she feels. Quote, "Love is simpler a matter of what people need and what they lack. It's two broken things fitting together for a time." Unfortunately, she clammed up and probably won't get another chance. By tomorrow morning, Huey will likely be dead, and Clara will spend the rest of her life tormented by the things that she never said and what might have happened if she had. How would Clara have telling Huey her feelings have helped anything? If anything, and Huey accepted those feelings, Huey was already set up to die, theoretically, by Nema if she was the one in this experiment that was going to be sacrificed. I don't even remember how Huey dies later. We'll get there. We'll get there and be reminded, and then we can be like, excuse me? So Huey brings Clara's attention to the wood with names on them, and this is where Thea brings her apprentices once they've passed the test. And you've got Emery's name and Jack's name, since both Clara's parents were Thea's apprentices who passed at one point. It's kind of surprising that Emery just was allowed to quit. Beneath the names, it's also carved, "If you read this, turn back now. Nema buried us, she'll bury you too." Was this written after people died or escaped? We don't know. But, that's just a red herring. Again, it's just a useless red herring that never amounts to anything. Before they can think or talk about much of what they have seen, they're called away. They continue on to meet Thea, who is much, much older than them, but she looks no older than Clara's mother. She's asked if she's done grieving over her great-grandfather, and she says yes, which is expected of her, and now they will assist in the delivery of a new child, as it is customs for when somebody dies, a new villager comes to fill in for the loss. Seth wanders around into the school while thinking of how curious his daughter is, how she's always asked questions everyone wants to know the answers to, but everyone's afraid to ask. He watches Nema talking to the kids about the fog, the unknown weapon no one was prepared for that took everything out before climate change could, and how big the populations were before the wipeout. Quote, "Another hand shoots up." Nema nods to the little girl at the end of it. "Why were they fighting?" "We could always find a reason," she replies. "We had different gods or different skins, or the fight had been going on for so long that we'd forgotten how to stop it. Somebody had something we needed, or we thought that they were planning to hurt us. Often this was cynical, as our leaders believing it would prolong their own power." It's such a childish way to look at war. Like, I understand, war is horrible. I don't wish war on anybody for any reason. War also always hurts the civilians. It's done by the leadership. And to boil it down to different gods, different skins, somebody's got something that we want. We can't forget how to, we've been fighting so long, we can't figure out how to stop, is such a baby way of talking about why war happens. Yes, there are rich people that go to war because they want somebody else's resources. That happens a lot. A lot of stuff does come down to salvation, which salvation is a bigger thing than just, oh, we just have different gods. No, that is way different. Believing somebody is a heretic, is a demon among your people, as a demon against your people, is a very intrinsic feeling. Regardless of how you feel about gods, it is such a deep-seated feeling to believe that somebody is against your soul, is an evil threat to your soul. You have, well, different skin colors. Okay, so then if you had the Civil War, okay, we're going to go with American history here. If you had the Civil War going on, or threats of the Civil War, how would you propose to solve that when there are people saying we're going to treat these as lessers and you can't tell us not to? What are your choices here? Are you going to just walk away and say, okay, fair enough, we're going to let this go? That people can just treat others as lesser? Or are you going to fight for what you believe against is an injustice? Because you're not going to argue your way into these people believing you. So, like, To boil it down to this, for this to be what she is calling it, and I know she's talking to children, but this is just so stupid. And to be like, well, violence just happens and it's all for dumb reasons and people should be able to do better. You're getting away from the nuances and the actual very personal reasons of why people fight. And it doesn't even have to be on the scale of war. Why do individual humans fight? Why do individual people get into arguments that destroys their families? Because you see people disagreeing on topics that they then believe the other person is evil, wanting to harm them. If you're not going to change your opinion, then you hate me, then you want to harm me, then you want to oppress me. And there's nothing you can do about that but fight the person or walk away. And if you walk away and that person follows you, what are you going to do? So this is just like somebody's dream world where there is no such thing as conflict. I say this, Seth is just like, leave me alone. And and Emery is like, yeah, okay, I guess for now. So this is just like a world in which believing a make-believe world in which violence or violent impulse or even this desire to like doesn't exist. And it can only work on this smaller scale. But even then, in a community of 160, you're going to find people that disagree. And that is like Emery. And yes, greed is a very powerful thing. Salvation is a very powerful thing. The sanctity of your soul is a very powerful thing. So this is dumb. This is just juvenile and ironically lacks understanding for others while believing if only everyone thought and acted like you, which is somehow possible, then the world would be better and never fighting again. That doesn't speak empathy. That speaks 2-year-old. This does apparently believe that you can have everyone live under a hive mind, though, and never have a problem. Quote, if we had her, none of this would have happened. She would have reined in our worst impulses. She lingers on that point, the children trying to imagine what this world would look like if the humanity had been able to outsource its collective consciousness. She's talking about if the other world had Abby. Speaking of Abby, the question then becomes for Nema, for these people that she has created, what is the purpose of life in this book? What is the purpose being given to these villagers to make them live on and believe? Is it community? Is they are living for their descendants to come to create this? They're told to create this society for their next of kin and then to raise the village up, to raise the history of themselves, to give to the next coming? Because we don't really even see that in the way that this is presented. We're never given of what any of these characters believe as their purpose, as why they exist, as why they should care about anything. They're just there until they die. Nema gets mad when one of the kids asks about Adel and says that she won't forgive him for his violence. She notices Seth. She goes to him and is informed about the missing gem, and she's like, oh no, by the way, I need you to boat me to the lab on the island. And he's like, okay. Now, you'd think if Nema wants this island to be violence-free, along with killing herself and she'd be removing Thea and Hephaestus and also Adel. But you would think that as the scientist that she is, Adel would be proof that her creatures are not nonviolent. Anyway, switch over to Adel, who is bathing and thinking about how he'd kill himself if he wasn't full of so much hate for the elders and his desire to free his friends from the elders' control. And I'm like, why isn't Nema out here sending somebody to go and kill him, or sending Hephaestus out there to kill him because they know that Hephaestus would? They're all on the same island. Like, there's nowhere else for them to hide. They're all in this small proximity. Abby contacts Adel, telling him that they should meet up with Nema on that island to try to kill her, because despite being Nema's creation, his sole purpose is to make sure that nothing threatens humanity, and Nema is threatening humanity. This is a lie from Abby, by the way. Abby lies straight to your face throughout the entire novel. So don't believe that. Abby is just manipulating Adel, because Abby is constantly going to tell you either my purpose is to protect humanity, or my purpose is to fulfill Nema's goals, is to be the bringer of Nema's dream. And so I will do whatever I have to do to make that happen, which includes lying to literally everybody at all times. So whatever he says, you cannot believe Abby, period, which makes this obnoxious because Abby is a rogue element. Abby is also in here being like, look, you should go to the island and see what your feelings do when you're around Nema. I'm not telling you to kill her because I couldn't possibly tell you to kill her. That would be against my protocol. But, you know, things happen when you're emotional. Things just happen, and it's fine. Clara is then out in the field, happier than she has ever been with what she is learning, and wishing that she didn't have this falling out with her mother because she would like to tell her mother about what she's learning. She tells Huey, quote, After my dad drowned, I wouldn't go near the sea, not for anything. My mum let me be afraid for a couple of weeks, and then one day she walked me out to the pier, right to the water's edge, and told me everything that we fear finds us eventually, so there's no point in trying to outrun it. We spent an hour on that pier, then finally she made me jump with her. It must have worked, says Huey. You're not afraid of anything. Of course I am, replies Clara. I just jump anyways. Clara and Huey get to this place where Thea's lab is, and it's called the Cauldron Garden. It's this biome of sorts with a self-sustaining ecosystem of plants and animals inside that they use for medicine and experiments. She tells the girls to catalog at least 5 different plants while she has gone off getting a child from the child garden. They wonder why they aren't allowed to go with her to see this child garden, but they shrug it off as overall unimportant and go about their mission. They determined that if Thea wanted them to see the child garden, then she would just have taken them with her. Huey and Clara then get separated in the garden. When she goes looking for Huey, she sees a snake eat a squirrel, hears screaming, gets worried, and chases out looking for Huey, running into Hephaestus instead. Immediately, Huey, Thea, and the small boy show up. The boy is the age of 8, which is the same child every child is when they come to live in the village. Huey is shaken. Clara knows the screaming she heard was Huey, but Thea lies, saying that it was a boy. Clara is confused, and Thea says that we need to go back to the village and get this boy to his home. Stop thinking so hard. We're gonna be late. This is the first time that Clara has ever been this close to Hephaestus, and he is intimidating. He is large, he has pits of darkness for eyes, and doesn't look like a human with a soul, as if she would know what that looks like based on being around villagers and 3 scientists. Let's not lie. Something is wrong with Huey as they're traveling back. She's not looking at anyone, her head is down, she's uneasy about this travel home, and she is not answering any of Clara's questions. They get back to the village, and this boy meets his new family, and Clara avoids talking to her mother because her mother won't agree with her on her life choices, so talk to the hand, Mom. Thea then gives Clara a vial of the new boy's blood to take to the lab for testing to keep busy so she doesn't go home to her mother, because Thea knows that there is tension between them, and she's like, look, it's so much easier to tell your mother I'm not going to talk to you, I'm busy, than to just be like, I'm not going to talk to you, I don't want to. Nema is then looking forward to testing this experiment, while Abby is this defang on the human race. Nema is looking forward to testing her experiment, while Abby says defanging the human race is not the only outcome of this. You could kill all of humanity. She waves her hand at Abby. But come on, girl, you made Abby. You can change that programming. Why is Abby like this? Apparently, Clara and Emery aren't the only mother-daughter fighting. Thea and Nema are too. Apparently, Emery and Clara aren't the only like-mother, like-daughter that are fighting. Thea and Nema are too, and haven't talked in a long while, though they are now for this experiment, even if it is even if they are short with one another. And they turn out to be arguing over how Nema spends her days fraternizing with the humans and teaching them, while Thea wants to solve the fog to get off of the island, and to also, I think it's just that, so that while Thea wants to solve the fog issue so that they can get off of the island. I guess Thea is not aware of Nema's experiment either, or they're doing completely different experiments for completely different reasons. This is one of the reasons we'll learn why they are at each other's throats, because they're actually not working together at all. Nema likes the community and tells Thea that they could have been friends if she didn't focus so much on trying to get rid of the fog. There's nothing out there. Who wants to rush to silence while Thea thinks that Nema's frivolous and wasting her time on these human-like creatures, these pointless villagers that are below them. Quote, "And what's the alternative?" demands Thea, frustrated. "Keep everybody trapped on this island forever? When the fog first appeared, you told us that our duty was to save as many people as we could and protect them as long as it took to give them the world back. When did you give up on that mission? When did this fraction of life become enough?" "A life," snorts Thea. "Before the world ended, I was surrounded by the greatest minds in history. We could build entire cities out of the coral in a few months. We could draw endless power from the sun and the waves and make food out of recycled protein. We could skip across the stratosphere and cross the planets in an hour, and now I have a lab filled with salvaged equipment hundreds of years old, held together by sticky tape. I'm surrounded by smiling idiots who go cross-eyed when I explain what an atom is. Why would I settle for any of this?" "Because this is better," yells Nema, thumping the table so hard that the equipment jumps. All those miracles that you described, what were they for? Yes, we had all of the food and energy that we could ever make, but only if you had the money to pay for it. Children were starving on the streets of those beautiful coral cities. People in poor countries were still dying of things that we'd cured hundreds of years prior. There were still wars being fought. Women still had to worry about walking home by themselves late at night. Children were still snatched off the streets, and I miss the same things that you do, Thea, but I don't miss who we used to be. I don't miss the violence that was everywhere. I don't miss the poverty or the anger or being afraid of every hate-peddling psychopath who might win the election. And what's the alternative? Demands Thea, frustrated. Keep everybody trapped on this island forever? Now, number one, Nema's rant right there seems too specific, especially it being from 2024. But it's so on the nose in its argument. And also, how are you going to tell me that we have all of this money? We're doing all of these things. You create food out of recycled proteins. So it sounds almost like a Star Trek style world, but you've still got hungry people. Who are the ones doing this? What is this technology for? Because it's obvious that the technological advancements done in this book are not for humanity's sake. And she's acting also like she wasn't part of that billionaire class. When she was. She sold the tickets to this island only to the billionaires and didn't think about bringing builders with her. Didn't think about bringing artists. Didn't think about bringing anybody but people with the cha-chings in their wallets that don't mean anything when the world has ended anyway. So she's got all of this money, all the money that she could have ever wanted in a world that has ended. And she'll never, ever admit to having been that person. Putting it in here that Nema was the one that likes the villagers, so why are we bringing up how dangerous everything was? And also, Nema is going after a presidential election when she is out here willing to murder everyone in existence in her attempt to create non-violent humans. She's a tyrant in her own right. She just is more acting as a god. But she thinks that she is above humans. She is better than the humans that she has betrayed because she is trying to make a better world. And we all know path to hell is paved in good intentions. And nobody is ever going to call her on that either. Like, you got Thea here being like, how about we care about, like, reclaiming the world instead of living in this dumpster fire of just this one little island where everything is dangerous outside of this bubble. But Nema's just like, no, my creations are better. I like hanging out with the villagers. Again, it ends up feeling like this exists for the argument, but not to create actual people. And you could make the arguments that Nema is making within the context of the story, but it's not actually justified. And again, it feels like it's trying too hard to outsmart the reader by misdirecting and being indirect in the conversations. This is when Nema tells Thea that she is going to inform the villagers of the truth about them. Thea warns that the last time a villager found out the truth, that villager tried to kill Nema because that was Adel. And she says, so be it. This is how it should be. What is Nema even trying to do right now? And why now? Why make now the time to do this after they just arbitrarily took Mattis away? Like I said, that was less than 24 hours ago that they saw Mattis off. How about the peace offering for this would have been to have Mattis just live to see the next day, live to see his first day of 60, and that is the turning of a new leaf. And then Nema is like, I have something to tell you. Because I don't think it's the best option to, like, make your arbitrary sacrifice right before telling them, BT dubs, I'm in charge of all of this. And you're not really people, but I think you're better than people. Anyway, Abby rings the bell for curfew and details where everyone is, telling Emery that her daughter loves her, but is uncertain of her because of their disagreement. Then she keeps to herself that people will die tonight. I'm a bit confused here as she says, quote, she doesn't understand that the village is a piece of machinery, every life one of its cogs and gears. As long as it endures, so will humanity. People will die tonight, but they can be replaced. It's been done before. The only thing that matters is the machine. Now, Abby says later in this story that her entire purpose is to fulfill Nema's goal. And Nema's goal is to give this world over to the meek, to create a world without violence, to create humans without violent impulses. So why is it that Abby is going to use Nema as this excuse when Abby is also supposed to be enforcing this belief that the human-like creatures are more valuable than humanity itself, unless it is straight up lying to you to misdirect that these people don't matter. I don't understand what Abby actually is supposed to have a perspective as. Like I said, none of these characters really have a strong perspective on their own and don't act it out. And this is in Abby's head. So Abby is straight lying to the reader if this is not what Abby thinks. Also, you have to compare Abby saying this now in thought to Abby in the prologue, who is arguing against Nema for putting humanity at risk. Though clearly, Abby doesn't consider the villagers to be humanity, even though Nema does consider them to be humanity or a replacement to humanity. Like, you could at least make the argument that humanity is the people in stasis and not the villagers, but because Nema values the villagers and not the people in stasis, then why isn't Abby the one who also thinks that as being the one programmed by Nema? Like, who the frick is in charge of Abby? Is Abby just on her own level? I cannot stand this freaking perspective of Abby, because Abby stands for nothing but lying to the freaking reader. Seth and Nema are pulling up to the island now, talking about the old world and his wife, how Emery got along better with her mother. Adel's visible on the shore, and Nema is alarmed, asking Abby what Adel is doing here since Abby is in Adel's head. She says she only didn't execute Adel because Abby said not to. Now, why would Abby say not to do that if Adel is a threat or was a threat to humanity? Again, it's another thing that doesn't make any sense. It's a convenience, because justify this. Adel has been suspect to danger this entire time, goes against Nema's entire desires for society. And why does Nema trust Abby's perspective on this when it clearly puts her in danger? 50 hours until extinction. Festus wakes up to an alarm going off, asking where his mother is, and Abby answers that she is in the village. Emery also wakes up, sees a fire at one of the warehouses, goes to start putting it out, and finds Nema's body in the wreckage, her head crushed by a falling beam. It doesn't appear that Nema's the only one dead. Clara shows up, and they're investigating, finding more bodies. I really think having Adel's perspective in this has weakened the thriller mystery part, but also I think it only gave us Adel's perspective to see him stroking the blade and talking about killing somebody to try to misdirect you into thinking that Adel was going to be the killer when Adel is not the killer. And it's one of the laziest ways that you can possibly do anything, because it couldn't show you suspicion or tension any other way than having somebody obsessively talk about wanting to kill Nema. Then we have some random character named Abbas appear and says that the soil is dead, and Abby lies, saying that it's diseased. Abbas is worried that they don't have enough food because the stores are now gone from the fire, and also from the poisoning. We return to Clara, and she can't find Huey, nor can Abby connect to Huey's mental version of herself. Clara worries that Huey is dead. Even her violin is destroyed. Abby says that's not necessarily true. They just don't know where she is. Abby, have you ever been disconnected from anybody? Again, Abby is proving that she lies to everybody that she talks to in order to manipulate the results that she wants. Thea then wakes up in a place that she feels comfortable, and we get more information about the memory gems. Quote, before society collapsed, these gems were a dominant form of entertainment. People bought memories the way that they'd previously bought music, books, video games, and movies. Instead of watching sports, they'd bought the memories of somebody taking part, then experienced the game themselves. For a few hours, everybody could be a lead singer in a rock band or participate in pornography firsthand. Of course, it wasn't all so innocent. Serial killers had their memories excavated and sold on the black market to fund their defenses. Certain countries loosened their laws, allowing the legal trade of rape and child exploitation memories. A few governments tried to ban the technology, but humanity does not easily abandon its pleasures, even the vile ones. It's kind of interesting choice to be part of pornography with the innocent pleasures. I don't think that's really what you meant, but Thea's realizing that she doesn't remember anything from the last 12 hours. Abby admits that he has wiped everyone's memories from the last night under Nema's orders. You lying frickin' liar. You did that for you, not for Nema. Get Nema's name out of your mouth, because you were doing it for you, Abby. I'm so sick of you. Quote, she believed that repressing the memories was a greater risk than removing them, I explain. Thea stares at her bloodied clothes, her head starting to swim. Why? Her tone is guarded, worried by the answer. What could be so dangerous about the last 12 hours? I don't know, I respond. My memories were also expunged. I can tell you that the warehouse is currently aflame. Our storehouse is empty, and the fields are blighted. Every villager has sustained minor injuries, many of which require immediate medical attention. There have been 7 casualties, including... Thea stands up, wobbling slightly. Where's Nema? She interrupts. I want to see her immediately. Nema's dead. Abby? You're the one that suppressed the memories. You did not suppress your own memories. You set this up. You know the truth. You're lying to everybody. This is what pisses me off. The only reason that this story actually exists in the state that it is currently in is because Abby lies its face off the entire way through the story when Abby knows exactly what is going on and is in control, and there is no reason for any of this to exist. And that makes the perspective of it so much more annoying. Like, whatever. I can understand Abby lying to the villagers because it's a manipulator. Abby is also lying to the reader. And maybe you're going to be like, and maybe you can make the argument that Abby is treating the reader also like one of the villagers by lying and manipulating the freaking reader. I'm sorry. I don't buy into it because instead I am having the author lie to my face constantly in a book that is supposed to be a mystery that is not laying down breadcrumbs to chase the mystery. It is just lying to your face so that it can go twist, 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 and constantly going, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Abby, you do freaking know. Screw you for lying in your thoughts, because it's not just the villagers you lie to, it's me. And when the books, this is something that pisses me off in every book, is when a book shows you that it will lie to the reader directly. That it is not going to be honest with the reader and presenting at least the scenario to follow. Then there is no reason to read the book. Because what you're supposed to do, especially with mysteries, is find the pieces to like put together, to like chase the thing and then be like, oh, at the end. But if it just wants to lie to you so that it can outsmart you, then there's nothing in the book that matters, because it's going to choose whatever it wants at any given time. And you'll never know. It doesn't matter. Nothing that it tells you matters, because everything is a lie. Clara appears to tell Thea that she can't find Huey. Her violin is smashed and she's disconnected from Abby's neural system. Thea's like, oh, well, she probably is dead. Don't think about it too much because there's nothing that we can do and we'll eventually find the body. But the trouble that's behind Huey is now ahead of us. So we need to focus on us and not the dead one. The only food that we have is in the kitchen. And if we don't make the right choices in the next couple of hours, we all may die. Okay, so stay focused. Yeah? Who cares about your dead love interest? Adel is walking through the village now, admiring seeing it in the daylight for the first time since he has been exiled. He comes to see Nema's body one last time, and you're telling me that he had a knife on the island and was sitting there stroking it, watching it. He didn't kill Nema? What was the point of his view? What was the point of his perspective then? Again, literally just to red herring the reader really freaking hard. Abby is telling him that he is being so reckless by walking around the way that he is. He sees Thea and asks how hard she is trying not to smile, and Abby says, quote, kindness first. Always, I say, reminding him of the village's unofficial law. You're going to get that saying a million times, and it's so dumb. They're like, what are we, in kindergarten? Emery approaches Thea, saying that there was a stab wound in Nema's body, and there wasn't anything around the body in that fire that could have done it, nor was there a blood trail from Nema supposedly staggering in after being stabbed. Thea snaps at Emery for talking to an elder the way that she is and shuns her, fully believing no foul play had been done. Also, get the frick out of my face. This is definitely going to go well for the 100 plus villagers who Thea sees as below her and that she's too smart for everyone. Somehow she's not even suspicious of Adel, who is wandering around the village covered in blood, despite everybody knowing that Adel hated Nema. Like, you would think it would at least be obvious to assume that, but nah. Emery goes to Nema's dorm to look for clues, and what happens? She finds a letter that partially hints at something, but doesn't give her enough information. Implies the son Hephaestus might be involved, so she asks Abby where he is and is told that he is going to the village. Emery goes to the pier next to investigate and finds some things that have been moved around. She jumps in the water and finds some piece of machinery, which is weird because no one around here litters. She goes back into town thinking, quote, her eyes dart from the kitchen to the tipped-over statues, the stage, and the rack of instruments at the back. Every one of them is in a different place from where they were before they went to bed. She bites her lip, struggles to place the fragments of last night in sensible order. Far as she can can tell, Nema went to the lighthouse with Seth, only to come back without a boat. She then managed to get herself stabbed by a blade, then disappeared before a beam fell onto her in a burning warehouse. Emery kicks a rock irritably, sending it flying into the bird bath with a loud ding. She stares at the puzzlement. The bird bath's in the wrong place, she declares. Why on earth would anybody move the bird bath? Clara and Emery run into each other and exchange what they know in regards to people disappearing. It turns out that everyone who was pulled from the fire had died during Abby's memory wipe, because Abby's memory wipe has the ability to be very, very lethal. So it's like 1 in 10 die when their memories are suppressed. And it's incredibly dangerous, which is why they don't normally do it. But apparently, Abby was like, we need to protect humanity, but also I'm going to mass erase everybody's memories and kill a bunch of people. Nema was the only one not brain wiped, theoretically, and Emery believes that this only happened because there was something much bigger going on, or else this wouldn't have happened. Then she suggests that the answers are under the bird bath. I guess the assumption is because it was moved, that's where they're hiding the answers. With Hephaestus and Thea together, she informs him of his mother's death. He is mourning and angry and beating up the buzzards that are flying around. He learns that his mom went to the warehouse and he doesn't understand why. Now we learn, quote, I don't understand. Maybe she was looking for something. Does it matter? It might, he says darkly. When she first put the call out to the refugees, she created a dead man switch that was designed to automatically turn off the barrier if her heart stopped. She'd seen the lawlessness and the rapes on the mainland, and she was worried that the same violence would find its way here. The dead man's switch was the deterrent. She wanted every new arrival to know that if she was killed, the fog would swallow the island whole. Thea stares at him, her pulse quickening with fear. Oh, we've been on this island for nearly a century. You can't tell me that she's never got around to turning it off? I've got equipment monitoring the fog. For 90 years, it hasn't made a peep. But then I woke up this morning and every light was flashing red, the barrier down. Thea, the fog closing in. At this rate, it will swallow the island in a little under 2 days. So it's like, my guess is her test of humanity was to see if the people turned to barbarianism when they were under the threat of certain death. Since previously she said that what scared her the most was not the end of the world, but how people just turned into barbarians the second that it seemed like they were all going to die. So she's like, well, either she's not worried about the fog killing them. She is seeing if she has bred violence out of people, or if this little society of villagers are going to turn into the same thing as they did on the mainland when humans ran everything. This next chapter starts out with such a thing to make you irritated. Quote, Abby, you need to get the barriers back up, demands Thea, loud enough to startle the vultures whose hungry eyes have turned on their dying comrade. The dead man's switch is not a protocol I can bypass, I explain. Nema's orders are clear. Damn the orders, she snaps. Stop the fog! I cannot disregard the instructions from Nema any more than your arm can disregard your desire to scratch your nose, I say. If it's any consolation, you'll be able to live in the Cauldron Garden. The fog cannot penetrate the dome. So from this, we know that Abby, well, I mean, we don't know this yet from this story, but Abby is lying to them because since Nema couldn't take Thea and Hephaestus with her, since they didn't agree to the way that she was, where she wanted to hand everything over and kill all humanity, which, why didn't she kill everyone in stasis as well? She wanted them to be scared into going into the Cauldron Garden and just live there forever, while the rest of the world was inherited by the meek villagers. And I use meek villagers because it's referencing Matthew 5:5. So, yeah, Abby is lying here. We don't necessarily know why Abby is lying, but pretty much everything, if Abby is talking, Abby is lying. He says, I can't disregard Nema's orders. Technically, Nema's orders are to let the fog come in because she knows that the fog is not dangerous, but wants to scare the crap out of these two people, these two humans, to get them contained because she believes that humans are fundamentally broken and violent and there's nothing you can do about them. So she needs to get them away from the villagers and just trap them. Thea's panicked, and Abby explains, quote, in the decades after the fog first appeared, they'd catch occasional broadcasts from survivors holed up in fallout shelters on the mainland or underground bunkers. At first, they were normal distress calls, but as time wore on, they became pleas for help, people sobbing as they described the cults and cannibalism unfolding in the concrete tombs that they'd sealed themselves in. The lucky ones simply starved to death, but they all went silent eventually. Do you think that they're villagers? Hephaestus is saying that Nema turned off the dead man switch a couple of years ago, but must have turned it back on more recently. Quote, why would she do that? The only reason I can come up with is that she thought that she was in danger. He scratches his nose, staring levelly at the barracks. She told me that she was planning to wake the villagers up after curfew and tell them the truth about the island. You remember how Adel reacted when he found out? He stormed the school with a knife and tried to take her head off. I think that one of the villagers, maybe all of them, chased her into that warehouse and set it alight. She probably wiped everybody's memories while hoping to save herself, but the beam fell and killed her before she got out. He nods at this account, obviously satisfied with his own reasoning, but Thea's more skeptical. Aside from Adil, no villager has ever hurt another. They've never had the physical fight. The children don't even play rough. They're pacifists to the point of evolutionary incompetence. The idea that they would be responsible for something as brutal as Nema's death strikes her as wildly implausible. You can't honestly be suggesting that she was murdered, she says. He lifts the sleeve of his t-shirt, showing her the scratches on his arms. These are made by fingers raking the skin, he says. It usually happens in fights, and I have dozens of them all over me. Bruises like those on your upper arms and wrists are made when you're being restrained and are struggling to get free. His voice tightens, thick with memory. I've seen them before. Believe me, Thea, there is no other way that we got these injuries. The villagers attacked us last night. They knew that Adel was still around, and there are older villagers that still exist from Adel's generation. How could all of them be proverbially non-violent when Adel has proven that there is a way for them to be violent in their kind? As they're assuming that every villager is now violent, or has the ability to be violent because he is scratched up and the murder happened, he's all ready to poison them all and abandon this experiment group, and they mean nothing. Thea helps Hephaestus down, saying that they need the villagers to maintain the island and that their equipment. Abby says the kill switch exists to disincentivize murder attempts on Nema's life, so if they find the murderer, then they can turn off the kill switch. I don't know how that works. Abby should know who the murderer is at this point. He's the one that wiped their memories, and there's nothing to say that Abby's memory would also be wiped. Unless you're telling me that this kill switch that is meant to protect everybody would also include Abby having to delete the information, the video, in its mind and its databanks for the last 12 hours. Abby also threatens, quote, if I feel you're unnecessarily harming the villagers, I will not raise the barrier no matter what answers your method reveals. And that has to be because he's protecting the villagers. But if Abby was truly protecting the villagers from these people, the barrier would be put back up, or the villagers would all be informed that they are not in danger, because the whole point is just to get Hephaestus and Thea into the garden thinking that they're going to die so that Abby can lock them in. But they also go to the garden a couple of times and never get locked in, so if I know. Abby says that they're going to use Emery to solve this murder, even though she's just a villager and the scientists here can't think above it. Come on, they're scientists who think that they can think better. Why is Emery the only curious one in existence? Thea and Hephaestus go to Emery and Clara. They're investigating the blood hidden under the bird bath, and Clara plans to test it to see if Huey's blood is in there. Hephaestus is being short-tempered and thinks that this is all super stupid. Does he want to solve this murder or not? Have the kill switch turned off or not? We need to know, because this attitude is doing nothing to be helpful, and Hephaestus isn't bringing up any other way to solve this murder. So, at least bring up a secondary plan, or get out of everybody's face, bro. Emery asks what was in that metal box that Huey gave to Clara the other day, and Clara is defensive to even her mother asking, quote, because Nema took the same box to that lighthouse last night. It was obviously important to her, and now something's happened to both of the people who handled it. Thea pinches the bridge of her nose, making it obvious that she believes these questions to be beneath her. She wouldn't even consider answering them if it weren't for the threat of the island. It was a sample box, she explains grudgingly. We used them to collect cutting from the Cauldron Garden. Nema told me that she left it up there the night before and asked me to collect it on my way back to the village. I have no idea why she wanted it or what was inside. Emery's eyes flicked to Thea's right hand. The bandage has come loose, revealing a ragged palm beneath. It was an unusual injury, thinks Emery. Most people woke up with broken bones and bruises. Nobody else has anything like this. Everyone is so needlessly combative in this scene now. It just feels like it's there to create tension and falsely slow things down. They're all under this threat. They're all suffering from the same memory loss and waking up with wounds and possible danger, and yet no one is really in this to help anyone, and nobody is in this to even help themselves. Emery pleads for Thea to let her investigate, and wasn't it Abby who had said, let them investigate Thea? And Thea's like, no. Okay, look, Thea either needs to get on board with this or not. And Thea knows that she can go and escape into the cauldron if she needs to. Was Thea, under the 90 years that she was working with Nema, she's made zero progress on getting rid of the fog, and she knows nothing about the emitters. She couldn't make her own emitters because she's got suits. She will explain later that she has bug suits. So, like, what has she been doing in these 90 years? Also, when we find out later that she has bug suits, she says that they were 1 year away from actually being ready to use. They were just a prototype that weren't quite ready. She's taken 90 years to work on a bug-proof suit. What? Nema did not bring the best and brightest to this island at all. Thea doesn't want to let Emery investigate, and she's like, do you remember why I quit? Why we didn't get along? Which honestly is surprising that these plebeians even are given the ability to quit when they're just cogs and they can be killed for anything by the scientists. Like, why didn't Thea just end her? It sounds like they die very often when they work for Thea, and that could even just be because Thea ends them when they don't do what they're told. Thea says, quote, because you wouldn't stop asking questions, and you were relentless in the pursuit of answers. I don't doubt your nature, Emery. It's your temperament I call into question. Why would I trust you with something so important? Because either you or Hephaestus is more than likely the murderer. Nobody in this village has ever hurt anybody else intentionally. I don't believe that changed last night. If I'm right, you'll need a third party to investigate because you can't trust each other. Why would I murder my mentor? Why would Hephaestus murder his own mother? I'm asking you to let me find out. The fog will be here in less than 2 days, and unless we find out who killed Nema, it is going to tear apart everybody I love, including my daughter. I can't sit here doing nothing. She searches Thea's face for some hint of her thinking, but all she sees is disdain and doubt. This is what I'm good at, she pleads. Let me be of service. Thea is a scientist. Emery asked questions. She had an endless curiosity. You're telling me that that is not what you want in another scientist, in an apprentice? That's not an apprentice then. You're not finding somebody who wants to do science with you. You're looking for a plebeian servant. Also, she's sitting over here being like, look, I want this investigated. I want to know who killed Nema, but not you. Anybody but you, actually anybody but any of the villagers. Give me a good reason. Give me something. Because right now it's the arbitrary of, no, I don't want to. No, why? Give us an alternative. You don't got an alternative? Then shut up, Thea, or you are also lying. It's just arbitrary combativeness. Clara is now in Thea's lab testing the blood samples, and yes, the blood under the bird bath was Huey's. Thea is taking Emery up the volcano to fully inform her that she's allowed to now investigate because no one else would have noticed the bird bath was 12 feet off. That's not really a small change, I would say. When they're in a science environment, you would have seen something. There's this moment where Emery also asks how she can know that Thea didn't kill Nema, and she's like, we've been trapped together for 90 years. If I was gonna kill her, I would have done so before now. I guess that's a reason why spouses aren't the murderers of their spouses after decades, I guess. I know that you're defending yourself, Thea, but this is the most garbage excuse for a supposed genius. And then she asks about Hephaestus, and Thea answers, quote, I'll not do your work for you, Emery. If you want those answers, you'll have to ask him yourself. Or, excuse me? You are not doing the work for her. This is an interview. People are going to lie. The information that you give her about Hephaestus is something that she can then wager, that she can then check against what Hephaestus says to see if Hephaestus is lying or to see if Thea is lying. By not giving information, you are not helping the investigation, which makes you look suspicious. It's not doing the work for her by giving a character expression that they would never see because Hephaestus doesn't hang out with villagers. She's taken to where the children come from at the Cauldron Garden. Quote, they enter the golden glade where 3 huge dewdrops are dangling from a pulsing vine that's thicker than Emery's body. Her eyes widen, her mouth falling open. There's a little girl floating in the dewdrop nearest to her, curling up in the fetal position. She's much younger looking than the 8-year-old children who arrive in the village. Nema taught them that natural childbirth fell out of favor in the old world as most mothers didn't want to endure the discomfort. She never explained what replaced it. Thea does what Nema was going to do and tells Emery what her and people like her are for. Quote, you're not human, replies Thea. You're a product, Emery. Something Blackheath made and sold like dishwashers and phones. Underneath that decorative flesh, you have more in common with these plants than me and Hephaestus. This implies someone is buying them or was buying them. But who is this product made for? Well, we're going to find out here. Quote, for 40 years before the fog, Nema grew the first generation of your people to fight wars so humans wouldn't have to. She sold you to any government with the credit card and bought this island with the profits. She called you simulacrums, and you were so successful that she eventually adapted you to a residential market. That's when she put faces on you and stuffed you full of halfway convincing emotions. Anybody with, her tone suggests very clearly that she believes this was a bad idea. Anybody with savings could have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, a servant or a driver. That's why you only live until you're 60. It's a built-in obsolescence, a way of ensuring Blackheath's customers always come back for the newest model. I feel like if this was to get people to buy the newest model, especially because it's all about having credit cards, baby, the life of these things would not be 60. It would be 30 at max, you know? And if these things start at age 8, would they sell girlfriends and boyfriends starting at age 8? Thea then finishes by explaining, quote, we're humans, confirms Thea, unable to keep the pride from her tone. There are 149 of us left, but the rest are in stasis capsules in Blackheath. We didn't want to sleep through the calamity. I want to destroy the fog, and Hephaestus didn't want to leave his mother's side. Blackheath is gone, Emery says hoarsely. The fog. The capsules are sealed in a fortified room. We can't reach them, but they'll be perfectly safe until we can. The humans will sleep their way through the rebuild. That's what your people are for. Every night after curfew, you go to your second jobs. You maintain the equipment, keeping them alive. You clean the dust off the solar panels and repair the wave generators. Eventually, when we've worked out how to destroy the fog, you'll rebuild their cities so that we can wake them up. They don't age down there, so they'll stumble out, ready to pick up their old lives. Your people will cut their lawns and make them cocktails and do whatever else they want doing. That's the package that Nema sold them when the world ended. That's what she told you last night, and that's why Hephaestus believes your people killed her. So, they're just tools to rebuild humanity. But then, what was all of this talking about people who wouldn't fight anymore? They are running, this is a running theme with this author's work where I feel like I'm being gaslit halfway through the story because the author has characters talking to each other that wouldn't be lying. I mean, going back to the prologue at the very beginning, there's no reason for Nema to be lying to Abby because Abby is going to help fulfill her plan, which is killing off the rest of the humans to hand over the world to the villagers. So we shouldn't even have that setup, but it has to lie to the reader. Now there's asking why Nema would even teach them or lie to them and pretend that they were people if they weren't. Quote, believe it or not, she was trying to be kind. The first few generations of your people were clumsy and stupid, impossible to mistake for humans. But after we got stuck here, Nema started tampering with your DNA, changing you, making you more lifelike. I think that she fooled herself in the end. She started feeling guilty. She wanted you to have real lives. Frankly, I've always thought her obsession with you people was a little perverse. For all her work, you're still not people. You can't be creative or original. Everything you are is mimicry. You can't be anything more than you were designed to be. You can't even procreate. If those pods break, your entire species dies out. It felt like she'd fallen in love with her dolls. I assumed that there was something that she wasn't telling me, some greater purpose to it all, but maybe she was just lonely. Emery questions, quote, why did Nema decide to tell us the truth last night? Was there something that provoked it? Thea rolls her head, debating the question. Nema didn't think in straight lines. She solved problems by coming at them from right angles, seeing things that we never thought about. Your question shouldn't be why she did it. It should be what problem was she trying to solve? Thea is such a smart aleck. That is the exact same question. She's just like, I'm gonna take your question, but make it smarter. Thea is ChatGPT. Emery asks why she didn't show me this, and Thea answers, back in the village, you told me that only 2 people could have killed Nema, but you're wrong. That's why I brought you up here. The ability to kill is as much part of your DNA as it is in mine, perhaps more so. Your people were built to be soldiers long before we converted you into laborers. We are not capable of violence, disagrees Emery stubbornly. Of course you're capable, scoffs Thea. You only think that you're not because Abby's been in your head since you were born, conditioning your behavior. Be kind, be nice, be polite. Have you ever wondered what it'd be like without her in there, prodding you to be better all the time? If you're to investigate, I don't want you blinded by loyalty or a lack of facts. You need an open mind. Start with Adel. He learned what you really were 5 years ago and immediately went after Nema with a scalpel. I am certain that he would have tried it again if given the chance. So they have free will, but they don't have free will, but they have free will? Thea tells Emery to keep her investigation on this a secret from Hephaestus because he wouldn't take it well, but also she has free reign to go off wherever she needs to solve it, and Thea says that if Emery finds any evidence that Thea did this, then she'll kill herself. Because even Thea and Hephaestus don't remember what happened that night. Nobody remembers what happened that night because Abby erased it. And you know why? Because Nema's evil. Because she wanted Hephaestus and Thea to either run into the Cauldron Garden and live out their lives in there, or to kill each other. To get rid of the remaining living humans. Because Nema's evil. Emery, Clara, and Magdalene are hanging out now, talking about what they know, who the killer might be, and that new kid, Ben, the kid that they brought down from the garden a couple of days ago, is writing advanced math formulas that he shouldn't know. That's just to, I was wondering if that would come into anything later. It's not. It's just to like signal that he's going to be the Messiah at the end of this. You'll see. They get on the topic of Adel when he was banished and how he destroyed paintings the morning that he was banished. He also demanded that Nema give him something back. They don't know what. Okay. Next, Emery and Clara are investigating the farm/soil for how it's killed off all the plants, and it's talking to some other villagers that don't really matter. One of them is missing their shoes. When Emery is confused, we get, quote, the crinkle of Emery's forehead is the only indication that she finds this strange, as I've spent morning hammering down her curiosity. So, Abby is specifically stopping Emery from pursuing certain things, stamping down Emery's curiosity, attacking Emery for being curious, period, which lets you know that Emery is working against these characters to manipulate them the entire time. The story is bogus. For some reason, 3 people went to Adel's house in the middle of the night, so they're gonna go and look into that. Emery starts asking why Adel could hurt anyone with the brain control in there when Abby can take control of anyone at any time. And he says, quote, first, I can't control humans. I'm not woven through them in the same way that I'm woven through your people. I can't even enforce curfew on them. Second, Adel is suffering from one of the neurodegenerative conditions that Thea mentioned this morning. It's going to kill him, but until it does, he's completely free of my control, and he has been for the last 5 years. Finally, it takes a few seconds for me to take control of somebody's body. Anybody who acted in the heat of the moment without prior forethought would have had the time to stab Nema. If Adel was free of your control, why didn't he attempt to hurt Nema earlier? Because if he had, Magdalene's life would have been forfeit. Those were the terms of his exile. But Abby was literally in Adel's head as Adel has been cradling a knife. It wouldn't be spur of the moment. He would know because he was telling Adel to go and kill some. Again, I need to stop trying to logic with this stupid AI because it's just lying the entire time. And I'm going to drive myself crazy by trying to argue with this liar. Anyway, I'm going to stop on that note, because I think the point has come across. They get to Adel's house. He's not there, but they find a painting from Magdalene that she did back when he was exiled. This one was stored in the warehouse and has bloody fingerprints on it. They think that he saved it from the fire, so he must have been there the night of the fire, if not, doing more than stealing this painting. They want to question him because he has all of the motive and the ability to have killed Nema. Emery says that she knows where the dude likely spent his evenings, so they'll go and take him there. Thea is autopsying Nema's body and trying to determine who done it. Quote, somebody must have truly hated her to have done this. They murdered her and kept murdering her long after she died. They were digging for her soul, trying to kill the ghost. The only person on the island capable of this brutality is Hephaestus, Thea thinks. The counterpoint is that he adored his awful mother. No, he revered her. He's not the only one. Did you not say that Adel was the one that could have done this? So Thea, why are you now jumping on, oh, it's only Hephaestus that could have done this stabby this many times? I don't think so. And it felt so heavy-handed in the red herring that was going on here. And Thea's passing judgment now on Nema, quote, Hephaestus wasn't simply her son. He was her acolyte, first in line for soft drinks at the cult of Nema. He genuinely believed that they were supposed to sit on this island, dutifully rebuild the world for the billionaires who were sleeping beneath them. She can still remember how they all arrived in their yachts and orbitals, bringing their spoiled children and haughty servants, escaping the encroaching apocalypse like aristocrats fleeing winter. It turned out Nema had been quietly selling Blackheath's service as a life raft to those who could afford it. That was the first time Thea had started to doubt her mentor. She hadn't been saving the engineers, builders, scientists, teachers, doctors, nurses, any of the people who would genuinely be useful to rebuild society. She had saved people with the deepest pockets and the longest political reach. She'd mistaken the end of the world for a temporary blip in service rather than the total reset. Not that it matters now. No, she did not. She obviously saw herself as part of the evil blight that she killed herself for in order to then hand over the world to these other things and wanted humans to have nothing to do with it, though you'll never get away from the villagers being derivatives of humans. But also then now you have to go, okay, so she sold tickets to this island, but did not bring her son. But her son is her acolyte. How is he not angry that she didn't bring him to the island to save him from the gangs that destroyed him so that he washed up on the island? Thea and Abby then go back and forth about Abby's responsibilities to help with this when she's like, I have no responsibility to you. Nema didn't name a predecessor, so I just serve humanity, while being a defiant jerk to Thea, who is trying to solve this and saying, quote, you understand that by impeding the investigation, you're putting the island at risk, I say. Abby is such a twat. I hate Abby so much. It's obvious that Nema was murdered from how her head was bashed in is the determination. Thea asks Abby why it exists now that Nema's gone, and it says, quote, now that Nema's dead, what are you for? Thea asks me out loud. My standing orders require me to protect every human life and ensure the long-term viability of the village, preventing any conflict or resentment from arising among that population. I confess I enjoy listening to my commandments like this. I've always pitied humanity for its lack of direction and thought it entirely wasteful that so many lives were allowed to wither on the vine before the apocalypse. I was created knowing exactly what I was for, and I've sought to offer the villagers the same gift. Purpose is something that must be given, or it'll be endlessly sought. And yet, Abby hasn't given any generation prior to this any purpose. Like, villagers don't talk about purpose. They're not given the abilities that they need to just be able to survive. That's why they go into sleep mode and then start working on things, because Abby says that they were never worth actually training to do anything. So Abby is straight lying to us because all of that was interior monologue of Abby saying it, but it's to us. If those villagers were worth anything, then Abby would have been giving them skills. And we know that they can give them skills because of how this book ends, and yet it never does. In fact, even at the end of this book, it doesn't. It gives one kid all of its information. Spoiler alert. So Thea's also not sure if she killed Nema, just questions herself. Did I do it? What reason would I have to do it? Thea is then thinking of living in the garden and letting the villagers die out, living out there. Quote, by my estimates, less than half of the village's population can be sheltered in the Cauldron Garden, I say. By choosing to save yourself, you effectively are ending 61 lives. They're simulacrums, she says, shrugging. Their only value is how useful they are to us. Nema disagreed. She believed her work had evolved with them. She saw them as she wanted to see them, disagrees Thea, immediately feeling a niggle of doubt. Look, Thea is already ready to do what Nema wants, which is lock herself in the garden. Why is Abby arguing this? Abby should be totally like, yes, definitely do that. Save yourself, get in there, get yourself comfortable. This is why it doesn't work, because the book constantly just makes arguments in order to make it longer, in order to be confusing and to hide from the reader what was actually happening. But you don't see Abby actually manipulating the characters in the specific directions that Nema wanted them to go. Then we go over to Seth, who is on his boat still, just waking up, and he can't remember anything. He doesn't know how he got there. He's informed that Nema is dead, and he can't believe it. He finds a random charcoal drawing on the floor of the boat. Quote, Nema's standing with Huey near the bird bath. The younger girl is clutching her violin, looking crestfallen, while Nema reassures her. Clara is sitting on a bench, carving one of her birds, while the band plays and people dance. And the diagram on the back with numbers, he doesn't understand. It's the 5-5. Or it's just a diagram. Actually, I can't remember if it was a whole diagram. A silhouette drops something off a side of a cliff, and Seth returns to the shore. Thea and Hephaestus talk about Nema's autopsy, and Hephaestus brought an instrument to suck the memories out of the villagers, though 9 out of 10 of them it'll kill. He also doesn't care because they either figure this out and stop the kill switch, or they're all going to die in 2 days anyway. Thea repeats that Nema was bludgeoned, and also she wears a decorative crucifix, not because she has faith, but just because she really liked the Bible as a book. Emery is having a crisis, not knowing what to do, and then says that she should look at the lighthouse. They find some of Nema's experiments and some dead bodies in this ward, and think that only people who could give info on this would be Nema or Thea. But Clara objects to asking Thea anything, her internal programming telling her that they're not allowed to ask the elders anything. Emery goes on about how mad do you think Thea would be if she found out that Blackheath was open, because all Thea has been wanting to do is to get into Blackheath, and they've been able to this whole time, but Nema has been lying to her about that. I thought that Thea knew how to get into Blackheath, but she was saying that they needed to build society first. But they're saying, nah, they couldn't get into it, and this is why Thea killed Nema. Clara and Emery grow to understand each other a little more. Clara seeing her mother's flaws as skills now, and Emery is saying how proud she is of her daughter. She just was tied up at being mad at Thea for Jack's death, so she was sad about that, so they hug it out. In the lighthouse, they are still not sure if Thea or Hephaestus killed Nema, find Nema's memory gem, but can't make sense of it. Also, they find Emery's husband's knife, they can't make sense of her. They found her memory gem, but they can't make sense of her memory gem. I thought Adel was given the memory gem and crushed it. Also, they find Emery's husband's knife, which he had on him when he drowned, so I guess now they're suspicious of his death. They return to the island, and Emery confronts Hephaestus about the knife being in the lab. He chokes her out, but Thea steps in Abby's absence. They leave, and Thea says, have a suspect ready for me next time. Clara and Emery are panicked about having never been attacked before. Abby says that he couldn't stop it because he can't control humans like he controls them. And Emery goes that I was stupid for walking in there. I didn't realize that humans were so casual with violence, but I do now. How do you even know what violence is if you've never seen it, if you've never been talked to about it? How do you even conceptualize something like that? They then go to investigate Thea's living space, and Emery thinks while walking around, quote, everybody in the village has a hobby that they indulge in their free time, whether they're making candles or carving animals. On Sundays, the villagers take these things from their dorms to dorms, laying gifts at their neighbors' doors as thanks for the help and kindness they've received during the last week. Naturally, the elders receive the most tributes, even though they contribute the least to the village. It always bothered Emery, but nobody else seemed to mind. Emery learns then that Thea was being kept from seeing her sister by Nema, and Abby alerts Emery that her father is about to do something stupid and she needs to get to him. Emery meets with Seth, who is going to tell the elders about the body that he saw being dropped off a cliff. He's all covered in blood and looking sussy, and Emery is trying to get the info out of him and to get him to stop doing anything, because the way that he looks is going to get him killed by going to Hephaestus, who has the brain plunger thing that is likely to kill him. Clara finds out that the crops were poisoned, but doesn't know the compound that she's seeing. She shows it to Thea and Hephaestus, who recognize it. And Thea is going to go and check the entrance of Blackheath to see if it is compromised by what's going on. With Seth in the lab, Clara is cleaning him up and running blood tests on his clothing. He insists he'll still give his mind over to the elders if it'll help figure out what happened, and the blood results come back on his outfit saying that it is Huey's. Seth doesn't remember ever seeing Huey. He never dropped Nema off at the lighthouse. He just saw this guy drop somebody over the edge of the cliff, and then he woke up in the boat. He doesn't remember anything else. They look at the image that he found on the boat, the one describing how happy they all were, and everyone is wondering what the frick happened to Nema. What did she say to all of them that took them from this happy moment to a night of murder? Because obviously this was on the last night that she was alive, and this is a photographic image as if it was not artistically contrived at all. Emery randomly asks about Clara's blade for carving birds and to put it under the scanner. It has Huey's blood on it. Emery rushes towards the brain extractor device that's just on the table that I'm surprised that Hef isn't carrying around with him, and smashes it at Seth's dismay because she doesn't want him to get hurt by admitting to something or offering himself up in a way that would end his life. Clara is arguing with her mother that what if she was the one who hurt Huey? I don't think that and her mother is like, I don't think you did. For some reason, Emery doesn't bring up in this combo how her kind can't do violence because of Abby. So it couldn't have been them, even though she's said that violence is a strictly human thing not that long ago. After reassuring Clara that she's innocent, Emery says curfew is coming and that they should tell everyone what's going on. The villagers are informed that their creations made by Nema. Thea and Hephaestus have no response to this. She also informs them that Nema was murdered, and as soon as they find out the killer, Hephaestus will kill them and the fog lock should be back on. The villagers get mad about this because how dare you serve anyone death? Quote, "We don't kill people, Emery," he argues. "We don't help others make excuses or betray who we are because we're scared or angry." "What is it that you want me to do instead, Dad?" she asks in a plaintive voice. "Stop searching?" I thought the whole thing was because of the kill switch. So I guess that they're chill with this, just letting a killer go if it means they all die. Look, not putting this guy to death to save the village does not stop you from killing people. It just stops you from, it just implicits you in different kinds of death because you still let this happen. So now it's going to be asking, should we sacrifice one for the many? More so a question. Emery then wakes up, not realizing whenever she fell asleep, all of the other villagers are now walking in a weird way and not responding to being called. She notices that they're asleep. Abby explains how she controls them to do labor while everyone is unconscious, since she finds teaching any skills to these people to be just a waste of time since they're all going to die when they're 60 anyway, if not sooner. And I'm wondering how this doesn't affect their energy or their muscles when they're awake and when doing dangerous work. Is this why they've had so many accidents and why they die early? Of course, Abby could just suppress the memory so that nobody remembers anybody who just disappears in the night because they died during night labor. She follows the workers into this lift and runs into Adel, who is coughing. It sounds like it might be TB. Emery expresses her anger and disbelief at being lied to about existence, and Adel is like, meh, we have a better existence because we may die early, but we get to live happily. The humans have everything at their disposal and live long lives and are never happy. Imagine being that shriveled up inside. That's a major twist for Adel, since Adel wanted to kill Nema for the truth since the beginning of this book. Adel reveals that that night he was planning to kill Nema. He actually had been invited to rejoin the village by her, and that she was going to confess to everyone what the village actually was. Emery questions Adel further, not trusting his story about not killing Nema, though the bloody shirt found later was Thea's, and Adel claims to have seen her holding a knife over the corpse. She also learns Jack, her husband, might have still been alive somewhere, and that his death was a lie. Emery races to the door of the Blackheath lab, but can't get in, and she bangs on it, screaming, "Why didn't you tell me he was alive this whole time?" Seemingly screaming at Abby. Why she had to run here and twist her ankle to do that, I don't know. The ankle twist also is only mentioned here and just disappears immediately after this. So not helpful. Didn't matter. I don't know why she ran to the lab. Thea and Hephaestus then get into Thea's lab and they see that Emery had been there. There's a body of someone from the Blackheath stasis in there. They go, Nema must have let you out the night that she died. Thea is now sure that she's learned that Blackheath was accessible and Nema lied to her this whole time, and that once Thea found out, then Thea killed Nema, but she just doesn't remember. Now it is time to cut open the body and see what Nema was doing with it. Also, the stasis gas is what seeped into the dirt and killed the plants. We're now at 23 hours to extinction. Adel, Seth, Clara, and Emery are now at the door of Blackheath, talking about getting in and not trusting Abby, and Abby, despite witnessing all of this, has no opinion on any of it and has just conveniently disappeared. They think that maybe Thea can get them into the lab, but they don't want to talk to her, especially not because Jack could be in there. And that would make them look guilty for killing Nema because Nema would have been lying to them as well. Now, this is also stupid that they're like, how do we get into Blackheath? Adel has the key. Adel knows he has the key. Adel will be the one that they go to later when they go, wait a second, Adel has the key to get into Blackheath lab. So I think it just pops in there when they decide And you don't even see this interaction. It's just Emery remembers in some chapter that Adel has the key to Blackheath Lab. And then the next thing you know, her and Adel are going into Blackheath Lab. So they're at Blackheath Lab going, how do we get in here with the guy who has the key, who knows he has the key? So they instead decide to go and check out the lighthouse to look for some new evidence. I don't know how they haven't gone to the lighthouse yet. That's that's her home away from home. They boat to the lighthouse island, and the boat is smashed by some freak choppiness in the ocean. They see machines underneath the water making it choppy, so that's fake. They make their way further onto the island, and then there are plants that are consuming animals up there. Quote, Emery points to the sleeping deer, its rib cage rising and falling. Over 30 of the flowers have attached themselves to it like leeches, their thorns silently slurping the blood from the deer's veins. Its limbs are twitching, its heartbeat weakening, it's dreaming itself to death. Clara approaches the flowers and touches them, showing the purple ones won't attack and the pink ones do, and there is a path going to the lighthouse. Why was this necessary? You've already got the defense up on the lighthouse, and Nema is anti-violence theoretically, but she is creating all of these weapons. Inside of the lighthouse is a lab. Thea and Hephaestus have already been there and greet the group because they're still inside. Thea acts like the most suspicious person ever and, quote, have you uncovered the killer? Adel blamed you, replies Emery blandly. Thea's body stiffens, the color running out of her face. She straightens her shoulders and back, trying to face down this nothing woman with her bright eyes, innocent face, and that great head of curly brown hair. What a bizarre description. She demands proof be brought to her. I don't know why Thea doesn't just go, nah, you did it, Emery. You broke the memory extractor to hide it, didn't you? Because Thea could actually be arguing with this chick. Thea could be redirecting. Thea could be, I'm not suspicious. You're suspicious. You people have always been suspicious. And personally, I think that you're hateful towards humans. Like, Thea, get a backbone. Thea and Hephaestus are looking for the key into Blackheath with Emery and Clara trying to get to the bottom of Nema's last experiment. There are spores apparently that allow Abby to work. So now we've got this fungus in the body that allows Abby to work. And the spores in the body, when put into a human body, kill the human body, but they work in the clone body. I don't really know how this works. If anybody tries to call this sci-fi, it's a lie. This is just magic. Thea explains that the condition to working in Blackheath was having this fungus in your head so that Abby could be in there as well. But there are different amounts. So you need a little bit of it in there so that Abby can exist, but then you need a lot of it in there in order to let Abby control the body. And so humans can only have enough in there to have Abby operate in your brain, but not enough to control the body. Quote, our research was worth billions, and it was Abby's job to monitor our thoughts and make sure that we weren't stealing secrets or committing corporate espionage for a rival. Anybody who left the company had their memories wiped so that they couldn't take their research with them, but that was the limit of what she could do. Emery asks why Nema would do this, and Thea explains, quote, Nema had everybody under her thumb for so long that she couldn't stand the idea of going back to a world where she wasn't in control. She wanted the same authority over humanity that she had over you. She didn't want to let them out and watch them destroy her precious island or build civilization that wasn't exactly to her specifications. She didn't want to feel threatened again. So everybody had a good reason to want her dead because she was a tyrant. But also, despite Thea having Abby in her head, Abby wasn't used to wipe the fact that it could enrage her, that this lowers Thea to the same level as the villagers. Also, she's like, okay, so you're likely to get your brain wiped if you worked for this company because this was a requirement, but also you've got a 1 in 10 chance of dying when you get your brain wiped because it's dangerous. Was that only for the villagers or was that also for the people? We'll never know because it's not talked about. But if you're going to enter a thing into this that says, hey, brain wiping often ends in death, but also this was corporate policy, I don't think that job was worth it, fam. Immediately, we're reminded that Nema was telling the villagers the truth about themselves to me, which contradicts this idea of control on everything. What perhaps did she have for that if she also wanted to maintain complete control? Like, I could see the argument of her wanting to give this information over and let the villagers choose her because that would mean more to her. if they chose to like her instead of just assumed that they liked her from her positioning. But I'm not seeing this and never really did. And if the whole thing was just to hand stuff over to the villagers, then Nema could have just killed herself. And then when she died, the kill switch could have been telling the villagers the truth for her in her absence. Emery addresses Hephaestus about his mother and the experiments, and we get, quote, each fact hit him like a hammer blow, chipping away at his calm exterior, revealing the guilt lurking beneath. He was a billionaire's son. He had never had to learn to hide his emotions convincingly or make excuses for his behavior. The world did that for him. So I guess billionaires and their relatives aren't psychopaths anymore on there here. They're just, emotionally stunted babies. Quote, his hand lashes out, but she skips out of reach, leaving him flailing. She'd never encountered blind rage until yesterday, but she's surprised by how predictable it is, how dependable. It's such an obvious weakness that she can't understand why he hasn't learned to temper it. Anybody that's easily goaded immediately stops thinking. They become the easiest thing in the world to manipulate. So Emery is immediately best girl when it comes to dealing with getting away from Hephaestus's anger. Emery and Seth then go through Nema's living space in the lighthouse, and they find a picture of Seth, Emery's dad, with a lake somewhere in the background, but there are no lakes on this island, which means at some point Seth left the island with his wife. So Seth brings this info to the scientists. Hephaestus and Thea immediately tell him that there is no way off of this island where Seth went to with his wife and took that picture. So Hef and Thea immediately tell him, okay, yes, there is a way off of this island to the place where you took a picture, but it looks like Nema probably erased your memory, so you don't know how it happened. And that would give you reason to want her dead. He didn't even remember this happened, mind you. But now they're saying that him not remembering that has happened and that Nema was keeping it from him is a reason why he is suspicious. Again, it's just throwing out another red herring that doesn't make any sense. Also, now Thea's throwing out this idea of this hazard suit to save them from the fog and the flies, saying that Nema must have completed it even though it's a year out or more of being completed. This is the suit I was mentioning earlier of how have you not completed a hazard suit after 90 years of being inside of the fog. Now we just skip to Emery going to Adil for the key to Blackheath. Yes, suddenly we just know. Suddenly that's where we're going, even though they were literally just there and not sure how to get in. We don't get any conversation about it. We just get Emery going to find Adil to ask him to let her into Blackheath. And then in the next chapter, she's in Blackheath. And it's a little bit before it tells us that Adil is with her as they're going into the Blackheath laboratory. Also amazing how suddenly Abby is back and interacting again in this chapter, because Abby has been absent for a little while. Randomly, as they're in the lab and discovering things, discovering these bodied suits that are out on these tables that are being experimented on, Adil is stabbed. By who? Don't know. Doesn't matter. We don't see anybody. Emery doesn't ask anything. She just holds Adil up and is like, oh no, what is happening? So I guess we're getting a little bit of an author cameo right here as well. Oh yeah, the other thing that they see in the Blackheath lab is some of the missing people from the village that are all dressed up in these work suits that are all in the zone, and they're just like working on stuff in there and they can't talk to people, and one of them is Jack. Like, these are the missing sailors that disappeared on that mission. They then immediately find Huey in the repair bay where she is being helped medically because she got so hurt at some point that the only thing that could save her was human technology. They disconnect Huey from all of this stuff and then move her onto a couch in a different room for some reason. Emery discovers Huey's brain has not been wiped because of the medicine that she is under needed to not be disturbed. And that must be why Thea wants to find her so bad. This plot point will never come back, by the way. Huey is the only person who remembers the murder. Thea is then on a rowboat with a bunch of food and finds her suit on that boat. Surprisingly, she's like, wow, I guess it's just been here this whole time. She puts the suit on and nears the edge of the safety bubble, choosing to disappear into the fog before Hephaestus can learn that she possibly killed Nema. She's going to go and kill herself because it's just so much easier than and hurts a lot less than Hephaestus bludgeoning her to death. She pushes into the fog despite Abby telling her to stop, and the bugs swarm her, and she gets so scared that she passes out. Emery is then currently jumping to conclusions, saying that Thea killed Adil in the lab. Why the frick does she think that it was her? There's no evidence that she was even in there. She doesn't see her. It was more likely one of these worker bees over here, because there's not even any sounds of anybody else down here. Hef says that he knew that Thea killed his mother. Hephaestus lights the infirmary on fire and gets Emery's attention. Hephaestus then says, once Emery comes over, Hephaestus is like, he knew that Thea killed his mother. He had the memory gem at his bedside when he woke up, but humans are terrible, so who cares? Quote, Thea never saw the fog up close, so she doesn't understand that it wasn't the most terrifying thing. It was just a cloud, some insects. There was no malevolence in it. The truly terrifying thing about the fog was how quickly it became a license for every vile thing in the human heart. You tell me, Emery, how could anybody in good conscience save a race that had witnessed the brutality of the fog and then decide to one-up it? He's peering at her, genuinely expecting the answer. He wants affirmation, forgiveness for what he's done. I don't know, she says meekly. It wasn't control my mother wanted. It was empathy. She knew that if we let everybody out of Blackheath, the same thing would happen again. She thought that if Abby had control, it could alter human nature from the inside. No more selfishness or greed or violence. For the first time in history, we'd be one people acting in harmony for the good of everybody. How does it even make sense that Hephaestus is saying this and believes in this mission when he has an anger issue himself that he doesn't control and doesn't care about and has been like, throw all these villagers away? He's supposed to be his mother's acolyte, and he's like, I'm totally chill with killing these people. He was never around the villagers. He didn't care about the villagers. In fact, he was jealous of the villagers for getting his mother's attention, and yet he's supposed to be his mother's acolyte, but also he knows how much his mother was like, they're going to inherit the earth. I'm so sad that my son was attacked by humans over there, so I'm making these other humans. My son is the reason why I did this. He knows all of this. Hephaestus and Emery have this showdown, which, while he's talking about how much his mother thought of them and didn't want him to be in pain, he would have some appreciation, but he doesn't. So Hephaestus and Emery showdown. She stabs him with a sleeping needle that she took from the lab and takes back her husband's knife. So now he's disarmed for the time being, but she's not going to kill him because that's not what villagers do. Now we're 2 hours from extinction. As Hephaestus said in the last chapter, the bugs are harmless. They just freak you out. But Thea doesn't know that. She wakes up on the boat, panicked that the bugs are right there, and jumps in the water to swim away. Emery and Seth are out there on a boat coming to get her, and once she is in the boat, she asks why she would help Adel and answers, quote, I have no clue, but he's the only person who'd ever tell the truth in 20 years, Thea declares hotly. I had no reason to kill him. He was going to give me the key to Blackheath. We're at 85% of the way here, and somebody is asking, hey, why did you do it? Why did you do this thing? Just say, I had nothing against him. Having your character constantly be like, I have no idea why I did the thing that I did. Sometimes that's acceptable. In fact, at the end of We Need to Talk About Kevin, when Kevin said he didn't understand why he did what he did, made perfect sense. Makes no sense here. Emery says that she found some sleeping darts back at the lighthouse that weren't mentioned at the time, and those are what she used on Hephaestus when she fought him. Yeah, sure. I told you, stuff just magically shows up. Everyone returns to the village center. Supplies are being gathered to get everybody to safety because they're 2 hours away from the bugs hitting, though also I don't know why Emery isn't telling all of these people that the bugs are not actually dangerous. They're still preparing. They're still moving supplies into the Cauldron Garden because half of the villagers are going to be taken into the Cauldron Garden and the other half are going to be left out. So now they're having people volunteer and be like, no, I'll stay and die. No, me. I'll be the sacrifice. Me. And now you have half of this village like deciding to be the tribute, and everybody is like, oh, you're so selfless. And Thea's like, this is ridiculous. Why would you die to save the murderer? Because they're going to put Hephaestus in there too. And they're like, because otherwise we'd be the ones killing him, and kindness always comes first. Mother Teresa over here, when asked what they'll do with Hephaestus once they get society back going again, they say, we'll ask him to work. He'll grow his own food and find a hobby just like us. There's a lot that he can teach us. He'll be of service. He'll kill you, every one of you. Their certainty wavers, but every face looks at Emery for strength. Her eyes never leave Thea's. This is what we've decided, she repeats. You're all mad, says Thea, hurling up her arms in exasperation. Fine. If that's what you want, we'll make our home in the Cauldron Garden, but you'll have to live with me telling you how wrong you were. Tell me everything and I'll talk to Hephaestus. This will go better for all of us if he learns the truth from me. They're implicit in any murders that happen after this because they knew that it would happen. and they let it happen just so that they could feel good about themselves. This is part of the suicidally altruistic that I complained about in my tropes that make me go oof. This is a level of that. Hephaestus wakes up on the school floor with Thea standing over him. He doesn't know he killed Nema yet because he hasn't put it together, and he goes, "I did it though, didn't I?" He also says that he was working against Nema because he wanted to clear the fog and let the people out before they were fixed. So his stabbing Emery in the same place that Nema and Huey had been stabbed, what made Emery believe that Hephaestus was the killer is that, one, he is so tall, and two, the place that he had stabbed Emery was the same place where Nema and Huey had been stabbed, which made her believe it had to be him because he is so tall, he's the only one that would stab in that spot. She's then explaining his motives to him as to why he would be the one that did it, because he's asking her, well, why would I do it? Why does she know? Why is she the one that's coming up with it? This entire thing is just showing you how worthless their criminal investigation is, because they're just literally just making it up as they go along. And they bounce between multiple people. You cannot have a criminal investigation system with how incompetent these people are. Emery hands him a letter from Nema, which says 5:5 on it, and immediately Hephaestus says that's from the Bible. It says the meek will inherit the earth. It's Matthew 5:5. Hephaestus did it because Nema wanted to keep humans out of the world and give the world to the villagers who were superior in every way, according to Nema. They had believed that the villagers couldn't make anything original, though, but Huey was composing remarkable original music the night that she died, showing that villagers had evolved into being able to create original things, so they weren't just derivatives repeating things that humans had already done. Nema also planned to leave her memory gem behind so that the villagers could learn from it, but Adel destroyed it in a rage against her. However, Hephaestus said that he woke up with it in his room, so was he lying about having it and knowing where it came from? Since they determined that Hephaestus is the guilty party, they're going to let him die by him putting the memory extractor on him, and then they're going to double check that he was the killer once he does it. Thea's going to let the humans go after the kill switch is off so that they can all work together to make society. Hephaestus puts the thing in his head, and then he dies. Thea then goes through Hephaestus's memories to see why he stood by his mother's desire to make this better world for people, though he just said that he was working against Thea to let people out before they were ready, and why he was so afraid of people. Quote, she rushes through childhood and adolescence, through his playboy life and flight from the fog. For the first time, she sees him with Ellie, witnessing the things that they never talked about, the traumas that bonded them and the hurts that they shared. So many agonies piled atop one another. At least now she understood why Hephaestus was so adamant that humanity had to be controlled. Nobody could suffer what he did and willingly set loose again. If this is how he felt, then why wasn't he ever kind to the villagers? Because he knew the villagers were supposed to be this thing that were better than humans, but he was always avoiding them. And you could have said, well, maybe he didn't want to infect them with his aggression, that his trauma that he couldn't get over. That's not explored. That's not expressed. That's not anywhere in this. And then he acted like he had no reason to do anything, when obviously it also shows that there was information in his head that had him thinking he was inferior. He should have followed after his mother. None of this makes sense but to drag out the book. Thea is also now angry at Nema for being so selfish. After the memories end, Seth says, the fog is still coming, so we didn't actually find the murderer. Emery is upset that people will die and that she has failed, but she says, quote, the world ended 90 years ago because too many people just let it. They had a chance to change things, to write a different future, and instead they gave themselves apathy. They let themselves believe the job was too big, so they wouldn't risk failing. This is how you save the world, Emery. One failure at a time, but always in the right direction. Now, what do you know? She is still trying to solve the murder and assumes that the villagers must have helped with the murder because of the dragging of devices from the lab. Emery is now saying that she might have killed Nema because she felt anger, and Seth is like, no, maybe I'm the killer. And so then now you have a bunch of other people going, no, maybe I'm the killer, maybe I'm the killer, maybe I'm the killer. And Seth is like, bruh, if I'm the killer, and I think I could be the killer, I don't know if I'm the killer, but I could be the killer, and I'm just going to kill myself, because if I am the killer, then Abby will know. And then we'll stop the kill switch because I've just killed myself. Abby is sitting here watching these people have an I'm Spartacus suicide thing where he is supposed to be protecting them and also knows that they're all wrong. But they're also all sitting here just about to talk about killing themselves. Now, as they argue about who the killer is, they also talk about how they want Thea to live because she knows how the science works. She knows how the birthing of their villagers works, and then none of their apprentices know. And Thea is upset. Quote, "For the first time, Emery sees the pain burning at the heart of this woman, the agony of living. She has been trapped here for 90 years, lied to by the people who cared more about her skills than her well-being. In that light, she seemed more villager than human." Are you telling me that humans don't have empathy at all? That is the thesis of this book, that humans lack entire sympathies, and the things that make anybody a villager is any empathy at all? So Abby is disapproving of Emery's desire to get to Blackheath Lab to lock it up because it's so far away that it'll be dangerous to get there because they only have an hour until the fog arrives. But Emery is like, no, I have to do it. Even if it kills everybody, she says. Kindness first, always. You taught us that. I just wish that you understood what it meant. What is Abby even doing? In a panic, Seth determines that he has had enough reasons to kill Nema. He doesn't know if he did it, but he's going to kill himself with the brain extractor. Even more dumb because the shifting cable cars that they are on as they are traveling, he's got the extractor in his hand. It shifts and it falls out of his hand, stopping him from killing himself. At that exact moment, the fog is catching up. They're all whimpering in the cable car, and they realize that the bugs aren't harming them when the bugs catch up. And then Emery determines randomly that Nema was the only person that could kill herself. Yes, she just has this brain blast moment that explains everything to her. Emery says that Nema did show that she was committing suicide the night that she was handing the world over to the villagers, and that she wanted the villager level control of Hephaestus and Thea because they never agreed to live in harmony with the villagers, but actually refused. So she tried to reason with them instead, and then just tried to lock them in the Cauldron Garden instead. You know, you'd think that Nema would get rid of them before leaving it all to the villagers. Nema is pretending to be some wonderful giver who cares about anything, but she is just a control freak, and she is extra stupid on top of that because she thinks that the only way that this could work with her son is to control him when he's jealous and upset that his mother never loved him. She could have been a mother to him instead, but she wasn't. She gave all of her attention to these villagers that she made, saying, well, he was the mistake and these were all of her start over. And you think that maybe that might cause a little bit of an aggression issue there, Nema. They determined that Adel was given the memory gem so that he could use all of the equipment and teach it to them, but Adel crushed it because it had been the last thing of Nema and he had wanted to kill Nema but didn't get to, so it was the closest that he could get to killing her. So then how did Hephaestus get that memory gem? Adel also is accused of having hated the elders so much that he wanted to stage it as either Hephaestus or Thea who killed Nema, so that one would kill the other out of anger, and then he could kill the surviving one in justice to save all of the villagers from the elders. And instead of condemning this act of violence, they're just like, aw, he does care. While this entire time they're telling us the villagers can't be violent. Kindness first, always. It's okay if it's okay if Adel kills the elders though, because they deserve it or something. I don't know. And now on top of that, it's stupid because Abby has known this all along. So that is how all of that comes together. Basically confirming the above, Abby comes to a little newbie villager boy named Ben, the one that was introduced that Clara and Huey went into the mountains lab to grab. And his mind is filled with all of Abby's information so that Ben can become the villager's messiah of knowledge. Abby is basically like, here's everything I know. Here's how to run everything. I want you to disseminate this knowledge among the villagers. Instead of, remember, all of the villagers have Abby in their head too. So Abby could be disseminating this himself. Instead, he gives it to the 8-year-old to be the messiah, to teach everybody what he now knows. And then Abby kills himself. Well, not yet. We have to get to the epilogue first, where Emery is talking to Abby, who engineered this whole thing, then asks to be killed so that humans can't be terrible and the villagers can own the world. Quote, there are 137 humans left in storage. Through me, they could gain complete control of your people. Whether they wake up tomorrow or in 500 years, once I'm destroyed, that threat evaporates. You're right. I did have my own agenda, but it was in service to Nema's aims. She believed in the potential of your people more than anything, but she didn't have the stomach to do what was necessary to see it realized. She wanted to put Hephaestus and Thea in a trap, but they're cleverer and cunning, and eventually their rage would have destroyed everything everything. For your people to thrive, the board needed to be swept completely clean. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to kill humans. This is the world that Nema wanted for you. No more secrets, no higher power. She trusted you to be better than what came before without needing a voice in your head to tell you how. When you've built your own civilization, you'll be able to wake the humans in Blackheath and guide them. Through your example, they'll finally learn to live peacefully. You're the solution she always dreamed about, not me. Is that also an insult to like all religion of like no voice in your head so you can just live with nothing, be nothing? Because remember, Nema was making an argument earlier about how people having different gods also was a reason for war. And so now she's like, well, now you live for nothing but yourselves. And you will not have this voice in your head guiding you, even though the voice in the head was the only thing that brought them up to not be violent. Unless she truly thinks... Is that the paradox here? Is that they're not actually violent and Nema thinks that she has replaced humans with something better? I mean, it could be. I don't know. I don't know, because this is where the story ends. And personally, I find it fairly insulting. In fact, that it's humanity sucks. We need to destroy everything God made. Nema became the new God, made a better version of humans, killed off the remainder of humans, and said, with no God, you can now have peace on everything, and you can be the leaders of all, and now I will kill myself, because that was the thing all along. Abby dies, and then Emery finds her husband, Jack, because now the mind control is gone, and now the world is starting over, a new, refreshed, which gives it this feeling like it truly thinks that it's going to be better, and this is not dystopian, but maybe it is meant to be dystopian. I don't know. You can let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, because you can definitely take the story in different ways, but I find it insulting, and I have no reason to trust Abby after being lied to for 400 pages. Anyway, getting into the final comments and commentary of this book, descriptions. The first things first, this author took more care with descriptions this time around versus in Darkwater, and part of me wonders if that was because of the historical fiction angle of the other one, where it was like not wanting to be called historical fiction or to be called out on being inaccurate, so it didn't describe things as much, whereas this is fantasy, and so he could make things up. Though there were bizarre choices in the world building that didn't really make sense for like genetic mutations that they engineered in the lab, still there was more time put into describing the setting in this, albeit the author still bounced around at the chapter headings and didn't really establish where we were and who we were with every time he bounced around, and it was important to do that because of how many characters there were in this. Getting into the villager culture, I could also believe some of the fanaticism of some of the villagers in this earlier on, rejecting asking any questions and being bothered by the way that Emery was, but there were a few times when this actually was shown, and when Emery actually came to them with, let me tell you what you are, there was no reaction from any of the villagers. Like, we're supposed to believe that Adol threw a fit and wanted to kill the elders when he found out what it was, but then when she tells the entire village the truth, there is literally no response from the villagers, not rejecting what she's saying, not getting angry, not even saying, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like, there's nothing there. So, like, these characters do just feel like cogs, but it's in the machine that the author created and not in the story. Overall, the world building felt pointless and did nothing for the story, including the previous herbivore animals or plants that now became bloodthirsty creatures that attacked things. Pacing. This book felt way too long because it kept repeating itself on jumping around between you're guilty, no, you're guilty, no, you're guilty, no, you're guilty, and what felt like it was just trying to make the reader confused by passing the hot potato. And then the end was just made up of I'm Didicus. So the only thing that made this book 400 pages the way that it was the author just lying to the reader the entire time. Handling exposition. This book felt way too ambitious and did not handle the exposition very well. There were far too many characters, too much information that the author wanted you to have, and even when it didn't matter, to the point that he'd mention a character in the story and then immediately start expositing you on it. Like, here's an example with when Clara was first mentioned, quote, "How's Clara? Emery's daughter was recently chosen to become one of Thea's apprentices, and she had been exploring the island for the first 3 weeks, part of her training. It's a huge honor, as she was one of the only 2 people who had made it through the trials. She now received an advanced education in mathematics, engineering, biology, and chemistry, learning things far beyond the understanding of most villagers." Why was that still beyond the understanding of most villagers? You could have used them for other things. If these villagers can learn that, the other villagers can be invested in, but apparently not. Now, this was just one example of like, thing mentioned, let me blurb it, but it did this constantly with information you did not need. Talking about now Abby and the omnipresent perspective. I don't think Abby worked for this because throughout the entire book, we're reminded again and again that Abby is there to do Nema what Nema wanted, which was to hand the world over to the villagers. We know this because even before she died, she was putting out 5-5 on things. In the prologue, you have Abby and Nema talking, and Abby is warning her against doing what she is about to do, which could end humanity. But if Abby knew from the very start her goal was to kill herself and then to hand the universe over to the villagers, then Abby would have no reason to fight the way that he did. The opening just feels like it is set up deliberately to lie to the reader, and the book constantly does this. Now, there are ways I've pointed out throughout the book where Abby could have lied to the villagers and lied to the elders to try to get them to go where he wanted them to go, which had to do with like getting the elders into the lab, into the cauldron, so that they can be trapped in that lock, and then the villagers get the island. But Abby lies in narration to the reader, like when it's not dialogue, when it's not trying to convince anything, which is just bad. If the author has to lie to the reader in order to keep suspense or in order to keep the story going, it is not good storytelling to me, especially in a mystery. There's just no way to actually solve anything because the author is just gonna lie to your face. So why trust anything? The ending of the book, completing with Abby giving all of the knowledge over to a child to lead everyone before killing itself, also proves this. Now, I do want to acknowledge the idea of giving this information, or the actual symbology of giving all this information to the child, which is like a hope in a next generation sort of thing. But also, why couldn't Abby just give all of that information to everyone, number one? And this also brings up the issue of how they were like, Nema had put all of her information into the gem so that they could run the devices and then that could be passed on, but then Adol destroyed the thing so then they couldn't use it. Abby had all the information to begin with. So why was Nema's gemstone, memory gem, that important? It wasn't. Abby had all this information from the very beginning. Abby could have informed them all from the very beginning. And Abby could have even manipulated all of the villagers to work against the elders, to scare them, to trick them into the facility before Abby gave them all the information they needed. And then Abby killed itself. Like, there were other options that this could have gone with that would have been more compelling with how Abby could have operated. And then it would have been like the villagers against the elders, and that would have caused the suspense. But instead, we've got this lying sack. The other thing that doesn't work with Abby is she's supposed to be helping to protect Nema's dreams and continues to lie to the villagers to get them in danger and doesn't step in when they are in danger, like Seth talking about killing himself. Why doesn't Abby step in for that? Not only that, but the narrative's perspective also just feels like it exists to read everyone's thoughts and exposit on the reader because it knows everything all the time. And also to conveniently say, I erased your memories, which is why you don't remember anything, so keep searching, scrub. Now, when it comes to the genre, I don't think this works as a mystery or a thriller because it gives you too much information all the time. It's got head hopping all of the time. It justifies it with the first person AI narrative. The only thing that it can pretend to do is act like it's a mystery by deliberately hiding information. But that's not a mystery. Much like Dark Water, there aren't crumbs left throughout the book that you can follow. The author just kind of magically resolves things as he sees fit and then gives you an explanation at the end, but nothing is actually set up, which makes it a sham pretending to be a mystery, but not having any of the elements of something that actually makes it a mystery. Adding to this is how literally no one freaking knew if they were involved in this period, including the humans Hephaestus and Thea, and needing other people to tell them what their motives were. What exactly was the difference between the two when clearly they were acting the same way, other than to be like, oh, it can't control their motions. Okay, but it can control literally everything else about them, including erasing their memories. So I think that's just an excuse to say why Nema didn't have Abby kill them. The writing. I have to say this author generally felt like he was writing thinking that he was smarter than the reader. Not to project anything on the author here, but the writing read like it thought that it was smarter than the reader and trying to show off how smart the book was in both this and Dark Water. Maybe I just misread this and Thea was supposed to be seemingly as arrogant as she was, but it wasn't just Thea that was arrogant. It was the entire self-righteous everything about this book. Into the characters, I've already touched on how the characters are inconsistent, unemotional, and unresponsive in every situation, but even traits that we are told that they have, they don't follow through. Emery's boundary pushing and curiosity is her defining feature that everyone talks about. But when she gets into situations like this, quote, "Haven't you seen the memory gem? It was missing, Abby said it fell into the sea. And you believed her? No. Good girl," he says, smiling. "Frankly, it's safer if you don't know. The secrets and the sea have its teeth, and they don't like being dragged onto the light." She just lets that go. She isn't supposed to be investigating, and she doesn't ask any questions when she is pushed back. The story also spends no time building or showing any relationship, and instead just tells you what it wants you to know or think about any of the characters and how to relate to them. Nema's character is so consistent, and you don't see anywhere in this story where her ideas go from being max capitalism to her regretting letting people die and how she wishes the world had more empathy. You don't see her changing her approach to her son as she talks about how the world needs more empathy. You don't see her showing in her behaviors her care for her son after he washed up on the shore and talked about his traumas. I'm assuming that I'm assuming that Nema saw her traumas because she says, "I did this all for you, Hephaestus." But at the same time, Nema is also like, "I want to trap my son in this thing and give the world to the kids." So this world wasn't for her son. She wanted to get rid of her son because she felt like she failed her son, and actually the world just failed her. She felt like her entire kind was defective and they all needed to be wiped off the face of the earth for this new kind of person that she made. It all just felt so arbitrary. The characters weren't characters and made arguments that felt like the author was slipping through constantly to evangelize at the reader about how terrible modern day and humans are. You could have made a conversation. You could have easily created Nema's motives going from max capitalism and how she left her son on the mainland to be attacked because she was so greedy to wanting to fix things with her son, realizing that she failed as a mother, that her son was too far gone, and then trying to obsessively recreate. You could have even had a freaking Hephaestus clone that she was trying to do better with. And we don't get any of that. Anyway, getting onto specifically Nema, let's not pretend that she wasn't a tyrant. She said that she wanted complete control over all people because humans were terrible and violent, and she resolved this by putting mental chips into these human-like creatures' heads and making sure that they couldn't breed so that she could only give them humans when she felt like it. So she could only give them children when she felt like it. So that she could program them to do what she wanted. She didn't teach them skills and killed them at 60. She still treated them as devices, even though it says that she thought that they were better than humans. So tell me why 90 years into this, when she was getting ready to hand them over the world, she was still arbitrarily killing them at 60. Because even without her, they're going to continue doing that tradition because that's what they were told needs to happen. The only thing that's not going to happen is they're going to get like the next person to hit 60 who is ready to die, just wakes up the next day and they're like, what the frick, after they just gave a funeral. Nema did nothing to fix this. It also shouldn't be overlooked, the biblical reference here, where one, Nema thinks that the Bible is bullshit, but she still admires it. She specifically referred to Matthew 5:5, the meek will inherit the earth, and used that to describe her plans, making herself into God and deciding to give the world over to her creations after removing the ones that God made. And yes, you do have to acknowledge this was taking God's creations from earth when she literally referenced the Bible. That's the character saying that God did wrong, I did right, and I am replacing him. Nema even tried to take over by controlling other humans, but that didn't work, so she bastardized humanity and killed herself to act like a martyr, letting the last of humanity die, including her son. She wished her son dead because she hated God and creation so much. Maybe that was the point. Humans are humans, regardless of Nema. Oh yeah, and then you've got like Adel can still kill people. The others can still be violent, even though they're telling you, oh no, we can't be violent, but we've seen them be able to be violent. And maybe that was the point, to say that humans will still be humans regardless, and Nema still made derivatives of herself in this horror show of a god complex, but who knows? Let me know your theories on like the take of this character. If Nema wanted to talk about empathy in humans, maybe she should have started by being a mother to her freaking son and apologizing to him for leaving him behind so that she could make more money. I'm just saying. The tropes. We're going to talk about some tropes real quick here. Number one, tracks spotted. As you know, whenever I find this in a book, I now mark it. So she stopped dead. almost made it, and then my voice stops her in her tracks. So it was here. I catch it because it's in so many books that I'm like, who is writing this? Stuart also seems to like genius young girls. Nema completed her doctorate when she was 14, while Thea was also a genius workaholic, and Hephaestus serves Nema, so he was below the women. Granted, the little boy at the end was now the Gemus, so children messiah in general, I guess. And also, pissing was mentioned here as well. Stakes, oddly enough, for the stakes of this book being that everybody is going to die in 4 days or less, there was oddly very little sense of urgency among anybody. And part of that had to do with the infighting that was just like, no, I'm not going to help you. No, I'm not going to help you. And Abby arbitrarily getting in the way to like not participate. There could have been so much more tension if Abby was manipulating both of them to like get the humans in the garden, which I don't know why you'd shut them into the Cauldron Garden, because that's where the freaking children are born, so you wouldn't want them in there anyway. I don't know. I genuinely do not know what the plan would have been if they actually got Thea and Hephaestus into the Cauldron Garden to lock themselves in there until the end of days, because they would not get any more villagers. And the last item is where this book fails for me. Nothing mattered. When the author never lets you forget that he is in control, that he is Abby, and that he is dropping things at convenience. It's magic. It's laughing in your face all of the time, and it talks down to you about how smart this book is. It's not a mystery. It's not a science fiction. It's magic. It's a rant about how terrible current year is and how humanity is doomed and how humans need to be washed clean and started fresh because humanity is a failed experiment. That was my takeaway anyway. A worthy conversation to be had about the contents of the story. Let me know what your thoughts are on The Last Murder at the End of the World. Have you read this book? Will you read this book? Looking forward to the discussion in the comments. With that said, have a great weekend and don't die.
To my children, Tommy, Ike, and Annabelle, if you forget everything else I ever said in the lifetime we shared together, I need you to remember 3 things. 1. Minimize violence done to and by women. As givers of life, it's against their nature, God's design, to do harm, and every act of violence done to them is meant to break their souls, turning what should be a giver of hope into a black widow, a woman who destroys the life and the mercy of her care for no other reason but the corruption of her own self. It is only when you come across these kinds of women that you should put them down, for they are no better than the men who tarnished them. However, take no glee in what must be done. Finding any life so far gone, a black hole is where someone's heart should be, leaves only one solution. The mercy of death, and it's a tragedy when it happens. Make no mistake, a woman's love is the most powerful thing on this earth. It can start wars, end them, and change the devil himself into someone God sees worthy of giving a second chance. She don't owe this love to anyone, but she do carry it around with her so long as she's living. That is why the devil will do everything he can to pervert women's nature and destroy their innocence. Of every crime you can commit during your lifetime, be it out of daring or necessity, for every defiance you may act out against God, government, or man, avoid harming the innocent. For the day that we become bloodthirsty beasts where love don't exist anymore is the day hell on earth has come. And as bad as it may seem at times nowadays, we ain't there yet. 2. Everything you do in your life will create consequences, both seen and unseen, extending further than you can imagine. Nothing you do exists solely within your arm's reach. Think about every decision you make, every action you take, because you won't know how long your choices will stalk you, be them destructions or blessings, rumors or history been made. The truth of the matter is, your life will be controlled not by the truth of what you've done, but by the way others carry on about you. And the thoughts of others are more real in the long term than what you know to be true. It won't stop affecting you just because it ain't real, and no matter the life you've lived, most men can't outrun what's written in them in ink. It ain't hopeless though. Be firm in knowing who you are outside of the noise, and live beyond the means of the news of the day. 3. There ain't anything stronger than a family you build for yourself. What you put together is worth fighting for. Protect your loved ones with your life, and they'll give theirs in return. Family ain't defined by blood, understand that. And for as strong as the bonds of your family are, know that you'll find just as much passion in the people who hate you. While you'll risk your life for those you care about, those who find your existence to be an insult to theirs will risk themselves to put an end to their affliction. As cruel as it may seem, a man who hates you will stop at nothing until one of yous is dead. It's a mistake to believe anything different. Don't let you be the ones taken from, be it by outlaw lawmen or by someone in between. The only one who'll be looking out for you is you and your kin. Maybe there's another way to be, but in all my years I've seen the worst of man, I ain't found another way around man's desire to conquer against all else. There ain't a changing of that mind, and sometimes I believe there ain't the ability for man to change at all, least of all through lead or legislation. I ain't claiming to be right about nothing. On many things, I don't want to be right, but what I do want is for my kids to live a better life than the one I did and avoid the mistakes that I made while finding the truth and purpose in what matter more than gold in this country. It's my hope that by sharing the things I learned that my kids will be better than their old man ever was, and that what I done isn't what people remember me for, but who y'all are gonna become. That'll be the legend of Bill Cassidy.